Okay, good morning and welcome to the November 26th special meeting of Algonquin Highlands Council. I will call the meeting to order and I'll ask the clerk to undertake a roll call.
Councillor Dayu?
Here.
Councillor Shortreed?
Here.
Councillor Barry?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Danielson?
Here.
Mayor Moffat?
Present. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, we'll move on to our business, which is our annual projects and priorities discussion, presentation and discussion by our department heads. And I will turn the meeting over to CAO Angie Bird.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just want to say a few things before we start our presentations. And to say that 2020 has been a challenging year, I would say is probably an understatement. For us, it'll be remembered as the year of, obviously, COVID-19 and the effect that it had on our communities and obviously around the world. For Algonquin Highlands, it's created some logistical and some financial challenges. It impacted how we provided service to the public and obviously led to some cancellation of many of our programs. Despite this, though, the township was still able to complete many planned projects throughout the year, and you'll see that throughout the presentations. We continue to work through and base our proposed projects on the priorities and objectives set by council and the strategic vision. But as Mayor Moffat often says, our community is changing. We see that even more now since the pandemic. As staff, we are mindful of these changes and as we plan for the future through our budget process. We've built a strong leadership team that not only can think and plan strategically for the future, but we are able to accomplish an incredible number of projects on an annual basis. We continually strive to find efficiencies while providing the best possible service to the public, but we are now at a point where that is not sustainable for the long term. Additional staff are needed in a variety of different areas to support the increasing workloads, and council will see that as well. Those recommendations for additions in various presentations. Once again, we are presenting ambitious projects for 2021, and we look forward to council's discussion and direction in this regard.
Thank you for that. It's good to have a nice, just a recap of where we've been. And I think you make a good point that we do undertake and complete a tremendous number of projects year to year, but things are changing. So without saying anything further on that, we'll just get right into the department presentations. And the first one is general government projects and priorities. And I believe the Treasurer, Jeannie Hughes, is going to take us through that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to add to, before I start, to add to Angie's comments there, when I joined Algonquin Highlands, I was actually expecting that it would be a quiet township to join for my final years in the municipal world. And I have to say, I am thoroughly impressed at the number of projects that we have accomplished, even through COVID here in Algonquin Highlands, that are like twofold over what I would have seen in 4 years in my former township. So kudos to all of the staff here and council in Algonquin Highlands. It's quite impressive. So
that's great. Thank you for that. It's nice to have a perspective from an outsider, so to speak. You're not an outsider now, but you when you come in with fresh eyes, it's nice to know what folks see. But thank you. So take it away.
Okay, so we do have our projects and priorities. We have a 2020 in review section of the document here. We have several items that were completed for the previous year or in this year. As you can see, we've indicated them as either underway or completed. There are a couple that were deferred. I don't know if you want me to go through them one by one and itemize them, or
how would council like to proceed? Do you want a little blurby blurb on each, or do you just want to go sort of page by page and ask any questions if you have them? It's council's choice how they'd like to proceed. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I don't know that we need to spend too much of our time on what's been accomplished, with the exception of of how it impacts our upcoming year. If there's a particular project that's going to impact our budget, then we probably should touch on that. But I'd personally, I'd rather concentrate on what's coming up, and maybe how last year's undone projects fit into that.
Sure. Does anybody have a divergent opinion on that? Councillor Dayu?
Sorry, not a divergent opinion. I just want to agree with Deputy Mayor Danielson in that we have had a chance to read through these documents, and I concur. It's a pretty impressive list. So if we shuffle past it quickly, it's not without applause for all the wonderful work that's been done.
Okay, thank you for that. So the accomplishments are administration accomplishments are there. The council accomplishments then are there. We see that, as has been noted, some are underway, a couple are deferred. So Jeannie, just take us through to the 2021 plan.
Okay, and just notably on any of the ones, or most of the ones that have been deferred, if any of the funds that were coming from reserves for those projects, those monies will stay in the reserves and then offset the cost in the future budget. So it shouldn't be an impact on the bottom line. So the 2021 administration project plan, one of the big items would be a basement renovation plan to continue an effort to expand and reorganize office space and create 3 new offices. We're hoping to establish and recruit a communications coordinator, which will help with the website improvements and things like that, which is next on the list. Upgrades and modernization to include fillable forms and some online payment options that basically during COVID, we've realized that we are going to need some more accessible ways of making payments, and this would be one of the ways. Cemetery software implementation, purchase and installation of a columbarium, appliance purchase to increase efficiency, so to consider with our climate change and so forth, if we get some newer appliances, we should be more efficient that way. Again, with the energy efficiency, we're looking at considering some LED lighting upgrades. We haven't got the costing yet on that, so we're not 100% sure on the prices of that, but we would definitely get that if council so wishes. And then we would also implement building department software in complement with our new financial software that should help with remote access when completing inspections for the building officials.
Before you move on to the council projects, we'll just circle back with council and find out if there are any questions or clarifications on what's being proposed. Of course, what council supports today will end up somehow in a budget. And so if there's anything that staff are bringing forward that you feel is not best pursued, now's the time to have that conversation. Councillor Barry.
I'm not sure if it lives on this page, but I kind of think it does. I just with when you're touching on the cemetery software and the columbarium, will the green burial project be considered for 2021? I don't know who wants to.
Yeah, I think I'll ask the clerk to speak to that.
Yes, there's a report that will be coming forward to council probably early May meeting with information covering green burials and other items associated with the cemetery and the bylaw.
That's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other questions, Deputy Mayor Danielson?
One of the things that I'm struggling with, and I think we need to talk about it right now, is how our planning for projects and priorities fits in or doesn't fit in with some of the things that we heard yesterday. Going forward, there's a lot of plans, and I think about things like staffing and software in particular, and if how we're approaching that, because there are recommendations for sort of trying to have similar software and across the county, and I look at, I know how badly needed a communications coordinator is here, possibly combined with other responsibilities, but that was something that that was on the list of projects in the study. So I just wanted to hear a comment from Jeannie and Angie about how that was approached.
Angie, do you want to take that?
Sure, I can. The software portion is certainly something that we have looked at when implementing it. You know, with our Diamond financial software, we did, going back to before we purchased it, it was something that we canvassed the rest of the municipalities to find out what they were using. And Minden Hills, I believe, was switching to it. Highlands East has it. The county, I believe, is going to it, as are we. I think Dysart was the only one that had a different one. So we definitely are taking that into consideration when we're looking at software. Same with the cemetery software. Cemetery software is very limited in the number of programs that they have anyway. So we definitely will be looking at that. The HR coordinator, communications coordinator, certainly we could wait for the recommendations, whatever comes out, or whatever is decided, I should say, from that recommendation at the county. But, you know, there has been definite push from council to put something in place. And so that's why that recommendation was coming forward. You know, we can wait, but we don't have anybody on staff to do what council wants to do now. So
at what cost is the wait? It could be a
right,
problem.
exactly. And my thought would be that the position would be a contract. So if something should come down from the county, it may be able to fold in, because I anticipate that it wouldn't be something immediate from the county. So we could get started anyways, and then the contract may be finished by the time the county implements something.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it certainly is my thought in terms of and it's not only mine. I think it's anybody who watched yesterday's meeting about the service delivery review. There's a lot to chew on there, and none of these things are going to happen in 6 months. There's a huge job to get any of those things moving. And the idea with the contract for this communications coordinator would be to immediately address some of the challenges that we have felt. You know, more appropriately aligning municipal messaging off of my page into a township page. We've got some online options that council wants to implement in the face of COVID. Through an online store where you can go on, and we did hear through the service delivery review report that the success of the building department having moved applications and whatnot online through COVID has been really well received. So some refinement of all of those things, and it would allow someone to take council through the conversation of its communication strategy and understanding when and how to use the bang the table software for not only increased communication, but increased engagement with the public when and where it's appropriate. So we can, as we know, we always have a parking lot when we do budget. And there's all kinds of things that end up in the parking lot that do or don't get brought back in. And depending on how we go, this could be one of them easily. It's not a core service like a road or a fire truck, but we can leave it in there in order to achieve one of the goals council would like to see come to fruition, but not have a permanent financial burden on the corporation. So that's sort of the story around that. I wanted to ask about, if I could, about if Angie, you could speak a little bit more just to the basement renovation plans, because I had certainly asked, well, what about accessibility? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm, definitely. So as council will recall, that was a project that was approved in the 2020 budget. We did not get to it just because of the pressures of COVID. And also we, in an effort to find some efficiencies before COVID hit, we decided to put the new maintenance coordinator in with the operations managers in there. They're in the office together, recognizing that the maintenance coordinator would be out and about most of the time. Then COVID hit, and it wasn't realistic to have two people in an office. And so on a go forward, it's realized that it's not going to be realistic to put two people in an office. So, with the addition of the possible addition of an I keep saying HR coordinator, communications coordinator, and some potential other options for positions, it's felt that if we put three people downstairs, potentially the public works department, then it'll free up some space here. As council knows, as soon as we put the addition on the office, we were full. So it's definitely needed. When we talked about accessibility, our CBO has advised that as long as we make ourselves available to the public in an accessible space, those offices don't have to have an elevator, for example, to access them.
Deputy Mayor Danielson.
But what about the issue of accessibility for the staff? That's it.
Yeah, and as far as the building code goes, the CBO and accessibility, the CBO would have to speak to that, but that's my basic knowledge of it.
It would be my belief that should an employment opportunity be filled by somebody who had accessibility needs, then we would just shuffle people around again. I think we're those kind of people.
Yeah.
And that's again the whole challenge is going back to Liz, what you said in the beginning about some implications that could be coming through the service delivery review, and what do we do and what do we wait for? And just to continue that, what do you wait for? We have a community that's ours and a larger community, growing, changing. People are asking for more and using things more. And where do we draw the line of continuing to provide acceptable service to the public versus not wanting to do too many things ahead in case they get realigned somewhere else. So it's that really fine line of not getting too far behind and not getting too far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll examine a lot more of that when we see numbers attached at budget time, for sure. Liz, go ahead.
Just like a kind of a minor question, but I'm just wondering if each one of the office spaces would have natural light.
Yes, two definitely would, direct natural light with a window, and one would have, the intent is to design it that it would have indirect natural light. So a window sort of at the top of the wall to bring natural light in from an adjacent one.
Anything else on those administrative projects? Okay. Councillor Dayu.
Bit of a follow-on to what you've been discussing about the basement. Angie, are you going to be thinking about possible work from home flex space, et cetera, how it's been going during COVID, and whether a part or all of the staff could consider working from home in the future? Is that also fitting into how you're thinking through basement planning?
Indirectly, yes. We continue to evaluate that. There are staff that continue to work from home, not full-time, but certainly off and on. And so we're continuing to look at that. I don't know if it forms a direct relation to the decision around the construction downstairs, but it certainly plays into the whole big picture of it.
Yeah, and Angie and I have had that conversation a couple of times. That exact conversation we also need to keep our eye on growth and needs. And could there ever be, and this is Jen, I think is your question, could there ever be a time when two people are actually sharing a physical space and one works 2 days a week and one works 3 and they switch off? So eventually those may become realistic considerations. And as Angie said, I think they're still floating around in the periphery at the moment because the only other option would be to either have a new building or put another addition on. And then there is also the considerations of service delivery review and what those implications might be. So there's lots of balls in the air around that, but I think the balls all have very precise labels on them, and they're all being considered at the same time. Deputy Mayor, go ahead, please.
Just one last question. Maybe I should know the answer to this, but where are we planning to place the columbarium?
It's Maple Lake, is it not?
St. Peter's.
St. Peter's, yeah. That was the plan there. Anything else on this particular page? Okay, Jeannie, look at all the projects for council. Can you take us through those, please?
Yes, you only have a couple of projects. We would like to implement the new Bang the Table software and then install the electronic streaming equipment in the chambers. But if you look at that nice picture, look at all of those ways you could communicate with the people.
Indeed, that's an outstanding graphic. Yeah, the Bang the Table software, again, if it becomes connected to a communications contract, should allow us to have that bigger conversation of public engagement, when, why, how, and what we use it for. So there may only be 2 bullets on the page, but they're both actually fairly big bullets. Madam CAO.
And I just wanted to sort of bring council up to speed on that, is that I am sort of corresponding with our contact with Bang the Table, and I'm hopeful to have that implemented before the end of the year, certainly, so that we can have it up and running for any engagement that council or consultation or input that council wants to have around short-term rentals as well. So.
Yeah, that was certainly the plan there. So, and I think we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of ways that COVID has just simply delayed all manner of things in supply chains and abilities to provide. So, any other questions, comments, thoughts, considerations for the administration section of this today? Okay, thanks for that, Jeannie. Of course, as the treasurer, Jeannie will be staying on through the entire presentation for any financial questions. The next presentation is planning, and I believe Mr. O'Callaghan will come along and tell us all about his world. I think we've
Morning.
lost Councillor Dayu. Good morning, Sean. Oh, she's back.
Morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Good morning.
Tell us the story of planning in terms of this year and going forward.
Certainly. So would you like me to just go through the PowerPoint presentation, or?
You know what I think is always helpful, it is for me, is just remind us again of the consistent conformity compliance chain of command there. I think that's always helpful.
Sure. So yeah, I include this every year just so it's a little reminder for council, but basically it starts with the Planning Act, provincial policy statement down to county and then township official plans, zoning bylaws, and then development agreements. So it starts very overarching, large philosophical statements and narrows down to very specific property-based development agreements, things like that.
Yeah, and I think this is always a really important reminder to have. Planning to me is like nesting dolls. And very often we might have a bylaw that somebody objects to, not realizing that the basis of the bylaw is entrenched in legislation over which we have no control. So planning can be confusing on a good day. And so these reminders help us keep in mind that how it tracks down from thou shalt to thou shalt, but why? So thank you for that. So yeah, just carry on. And I mean, you don't have an awful lot, but just, yeah, go through if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, so the first is the Cultural Resources Committee, which obviously there was some issues with COVID and meeting and moving forward with that committee's project of the 3 interpretive signs per year that the committee had set a goal of. So no signs were installed this year. Hoping to have the committee up and running for 2021 and moving forward with that project. So was hoping to budget money to continue forward with that project.
Okay, carry on.
Okay, and then Committee of Adjustments, just putting some money aside or budgeting some money for any potential education and training opportunities as they arise, just to keep the committee up to speed with current legislation and best practices.
And Sean, can that, is that online training or in-person training, or could it be online given the circumstances, and therefore go ahead?
It's typically online now. The Ontario Association of Committees of Adjustment and Consent Authorities has been working on a good virtual training programs. So hoping to have those rolled out for 2021.
Great, thank you. Any questions on either of those? Lisa Berry.
Just a clarification, when will our next OP be?
It would be, oh boy, that's a good test. In the next 2 years, I believe. I'll have to double check.
Okay.
Did I see another hand up there? No, okay. And tell us, just take us through your projects and priorities page. I mean, we've seen the completed part, so, or the not completed, sorry, completed and not completed. There's only 2 items there.
Mm-hmm.
And so just tell us what you have on deck for 2021. It's interesting, you know, we make Sean go through this process, but so much of what he does is legislative. There's not a lot of, you know, not a lot of discretion for fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's all fun. Planning's always fun. Yeah, so the zoning bylaw review, fingers crossed. There's been a lot of obstacles thrown in our path with completing this, but we are pushing forward and fully intending on completing that project this year. The development charges study in conjunction with the county, that is also underway. The background study is being completed. So there should be some more information on that coming forward in 2021. Short-term rental regulations, that'll also be looked at and brought back to council. The survey is being completed right now, the draft survey, so that will be brought to council before it's released to the public. Original shore road allowances across the road from water adjacent properties. That's another topic that we'll be addressing this coming year. And the Oxtongue Lake Community Center lot merger, which was previously discussed, moving forward with the necessary surveys and legal work to have that completed.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to ask about, you know, there's a lot of changes at the provincial level, and we have seen a number of reports you've brought forward. Is there anything that's sort of in the works that you think could be coming at us out of left field in the coming year that would have any implications on workload or costs or bylaws, zoning bylaw?
Nothing that dramatic. I mean, off the top of my head, and from what I've seen this past year, I mean, obviously that can change in a heartbeat, but no significant flags are jumping out at me that would dramatically change any of our typical planning processes we have in place right now. Okay,
thank you. Questions, thoughts, comments from council on Sean's admittedly somewhat linear world? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I'm just hoping with respect to the zoning bylaw that we can, because I think we all agreed that we had a number of particular topics that we'd like to talk about, you know, philosophically and what we'd like to see in the zoning bylaw. I just hope that we can start to get back to doing that sort of, you know, bit by bit, as opposed to having a huge document brought before us. And, you know, I know there's still a fair bit of work to do, so I just hope that we can break it up and start getting to work on it.
Yeah, and we can staff can have a look at that. You are right. We did break out a number of things that we have already spoken about, smaller footprints and chickens, and a couple of things. And there was definitely some work to be done, as was pointed out by Councillor Dayu, on the definitions around agricultural and what that included. So there's still a few things that will circle back to us, and maybe we'll leave that with staff to break some of those things out to more edible chunks for us as we move along. Councillor Barry.
As one of the sort of indirect recommendations yesterday at the service delivery review was talking about harmonizing official plans. And I just wonder if, like, how would something like that occur? Would that be a direction from a committee that hasn't been set yet? Would that be a philosophical conversation? Like, I just, personally, I think it makes sense for alignment where optimal. And I just wanted to just put that out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was gonna say, Sean, you can probably speak better to that than I can.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. So our official plan has to conform to the county official plan. So a lot of the language and policies that are in place in our plan are just repeated from the county plan. So I don't see that being a significant hurdle if we were to go in that direction with one official plan. Each township having their own zoning bylaw, however, I think that's still a critical thing to maintain, because that's, as you go down the planning hierarchy, it's when you get more specific. So, I mean, Algonquin Highlands compared to other townships in the area, I mean, each one is unique and needs to have their own specific policies, I think, for their area. There are certain policies that can be more aligned with neighboring townships, but for the most part, I think each township should maintain their own zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
And just try where it's feasible and appropriate to align language, so that the only thing that's different is what is unique to that municipality. And I think we need to remember too that, to Lisa's point, in order for there to be alignment in that regard requires an awful lot of talking by an awful lot of people. And also mentioned in the service delivery review about working groups. So we also need to know, I think we need to be careful, not unlike having gone through COVID, what it is how ambitious our plans are for the coming years, because the direction from the service delivery review, once the implementation committee decides what direction it's going to go in, the municipal staff from all municipalities are going to be spending a tremendous amount of time meeting to try and figure out how these things move forward. Because as I say, nothing happens overnight. So that, again, another one of those balls in the air around all of this is we still have a duty to undertake our business. And at the same time, we're asking staff to put in more time to work on undertaking our collective business. So just one more thing to keep in mind in terms of staff and what gets done.
For sure.
There's Deputy Mayor Danielson's hand. Go ahead, please.
I'm just going to say to Councillor Barry's comment about the official plan, if I'm not mistaken, the consultants did say that, that harmonization of OPs was a good idea, but there would still be the ability to have separate and unique aspects of it for each of the municipalities. So I think we can probably find the best of both worlds.
Good point. Good point. Any other questions, thoughts on the planning department? Okay, Sean, well, thank you for your time, and we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Next up is building and bylaw. So we will bring in Mr. Rogers. Good morning, David.
Morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council.
Thank you for your slide presentation. We have decided as a group that we are not going to go through the completed part because we can read that. We're just more interested in, I guess, if there's anything you want to say about, in particular, about things that weren't completed because of COVID, and then just take us through what it is the plans are for the coming year.
Again, through you, Mayor, most of the stuff was self-explanatory that we didn't get completed, obviously. Training and everything went out the window in a hurry, so. So if you want, we can move on to what we're hoping to get accomplished. The OBA is now providing online training, and the ministry has online courses. So hopefully Greg will be able to finish the ministry course that he has there. I have not heard yet from the Property Standards Association whether or not they're going to be offering that level 3 course that he needs to complete his certification with the Property Standards Association. The other projects that we have going, obviously the second part of the year 3 inspection program, which was voluntary, now will become mandatory, and year 4 the septic reinspection program will go ahead. So if everything works out, the septic reinspection program will be completed at the end of next year, and we'll have all the data from all that. Obviously there'll be some follow-up in the following year for open things that didn't get completed. So we're hoping to move through that. As it was mentioned earlier on in Jeannie's report about the purchase of City Reporter, hopefully if we can get that, that would allow Greg, as most of the councillors know, when we go out to inspections, we actually prepare handwritten inspection reports, we leave them on site, then we come back to the township office, we scan them in, we save them, and then put them back onto the computer. City Reporter will allow us to actually take out a tablet in our hot little hands, do the inspection on the tablet, and it will then send the email to the owner and the contractor, whoever the contacts are for that particular property. And when we come back into the office, it'll automatically upload onto our main server. So there's a big advantage for us in time saving doing that. It also
No, and I think that, sorry, go ahead.
It also cuts down a lot of the paper that we're creating. One of the biggest things Greg and I have noticed, like taking all the permits and everything electronically, we're only filling up about half a drawer where before we'd fill up 2.5 drawers with permits. So there's a lot less paperwork, and it's tracked better because it's all electronic. So that's the intent behind the City Reporter. And to go along with that, obviously we'd be looking at purchasing a couple of tablets so it would allow us to do it remotely. The other big one on there is looking at changing the staffing hours for Greg and myself during the summer hours, increasing them to 40 in an attempt to help take off some of the burden of trying to complete all our work in a 35-hour work week when we're just overwhelmed. So that's the other big one, which would obviously have some financial implications. And unfortunately, through to COVID and a few other things, the boat and trailer did not get surplus, so we hope to get that done in the spring. So those are my highlights. So if you have any questions, I'll certainly ready to take them.
I can say that I'm glad for the modernization money. I'm glad for the acquisition of some of these computer programs, and the way you describe having to, it sounds very Flintstone-y in today's day and age that you have to fill in pieces of paper and put them in a file folder. And I just think, notwithstanding signal challenges, if you need to do anything attached to the internet, it seems like a great way to go, much more efficient and ultimately better service for the public. So I'm certainly pleased to see that. Thoughts, questions, comments from members of council on David's World? Councillor Dayu.
I suppose just to add to that, I also think about all of the seasonal residents that we have here who aren't necessarily going to be around on the day that you do your inspection. And wouldn't it be great that they don't have to wait 2 weeks before they get back to the cottage to find out the results of that, but they can have it on their, on their desktop literally the same day. I think it is definitely a service improvement to the citizens of Algonquin Highlands. It's fabulous.
Liz, did you have your hand up?
I did. I just wanted to, I really like the sound of the programs and the tablets. I think that really helps your work and streamlines things a lot. I just wonder about Carol's comment that, what about if you're in an area where there is no signal? I'm assuming that you're, for some period of time, going to have backup paper. Sorry.
If I may answer that, Mayor?
Yes, please.
So from talking to the people that did the demonstration for us, so if I'm out in the middle of Bear Lake Road and they don't have a signal, but as I come back out, it will automatically update and send the email right then. I don't have to wait till I get back to the office. It will just do it as soon as it gets a signal.
That's fabulous, yeah.
Good. Yeah, great.
A lingering question, David, which is related, not related. Where did where did the province land with the proposed centralization of building code inspections, permit issuance? Where did that, whatever happened with that?
Again, through you, Mayor, it is still an ongoing discussion. I think a lot of things in the provincial government kind of got pushed aside like the rest of us with COVID. I know I continually check on our webpage from the Ontario Building Officials Associations, and they're constantly talking to the ministry regarding the changes that they're proposing. To date, I have not heard anything concrete that says they want to go to the administrative program that they were talking about.
Okay, well, keep us posted on that. Anything further for David for the Building and Bylaw Department? I see here it doesn't say hire 5 more bylaw enforcement officers, but that's okay. There eventually, I suppose. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
He might have liked to have added that
Yes.
line. I just wonder, although it's not specific to projects, sort of what percentage of success do you have with following up on problem properties?
I've made to you again, Mayor. Most of the problems we have, we get compliance right away. There are properties where we end up, as you know, we've taken people to court, and those ones do take a substantial amount of time. Have you seen, some of them have taken us years to actually get through the court process. And we do have a fair number of them right now that are taking a lot of our time up because people don't always do as we ask. And we have been in contacts with our solicitor to start moving a few of these other programs forward. So overall, about 80% compliance, but then when there is a difficult one, it does take time.
Yeah.
Anything else for David? Okay, thank you for your time and putting your thought into what's going to move ahead. And of course, going back, I asked this the other day about the voluntary septic reinspection program this year. Do we foresee any challenges having to get back to mandatory and then catching up on the people who didn't sign up for the voluntary one this year because of COVID? Is it going to be an overburden for WSP?
Again, through you, Mayor, from what I understand, WSP is under the impression that everything will go ahead and they will be able to complete it. As you are aware, our contract does include an additional year. It was actually a 5-year contract, but they're still hoping to get it completed within the 4. If it does fail, then we do have the extra year that's in the contract.
Okay, nice to have that buffer. Good. Thank you very much for that. And so thank you very much. And we'll move along to the next presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Next up is Fire and Emergency Services. And I believe the Fire Chief is coming in to join us.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chief. You're up, and I think you've probably been listening along, and everyone has read the presentations. And I think because you're the CEMC and COVID consumed a tremendous amount of your time, there's an awful lot of things that are either still in progress or unfortunately weren't completed. So maybe you could take us through the 2020 projects and where they are based on the fact that they're sort of life-saving services.
Right. So yeah, I mean, and I think I'm echoing a lot of what the other presentations are saying. Obviously, COVID has been a challenge, not only to complete projects, but also in our emergency response. And I am very proud that we've continued to provide our core services. So yeah, and as David said too, one of the biggest challenges has been training, completing training. The fire college has been closed. We do have mandatory NFPA training that we do need to complete. And also our driver training program, we had to put that on hold because just because of safety concerns, having 2 individuals in close proximity in a vehicle. So those will definitely be priorities in 2021. The other thing that I had on there as a priority was public education. Obviously, all fire departments are struggling with that now, how to deliver public education. So we're going to be focusing on that also in the new year.
And I think too that's something that can be, if council does support a contract for a communications coordinator, that could be folded into there too. There are a number of fire safety messages that are consistent calendar-wise in a year, and they could be pre-planned. And there's lots of platforms like Hootsuite and other programs that can allow the pre-population of specific messages for specific times of the year. So there's opportunity there to assist formalizing that program through that process should council support it. In terms of the delay, oh, sorry, you want to keep going? Or is that you're not?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to ask about, in terms of the delay of training, I'm assuming then that the fire marshal's office is okay with what is likely ending up with some non-compliance with NFPA standards because of COVID. That's pretty well assumed, is it?
That's correct, Mayor. Yes, obviously there's going to be a grace period. Now we have been identified as an essential service, and training is an essential part of what we do. So we've been told to push forward with our training.
Okay, and in terms of ensuring, frontline workers, firefighters, we don't have a tremendous number of calls in Algonquin Highlands, but they're still there. And is there any enhanced requirement for ensuring that any COVID-related training in terms of disinfecting or appropriate PPE for certain fire calls? Is there any advanced criteria for participating in those training sessions to ensure that everybody's doing the right thing?
Not currently. We're monitoring. We're following the guidelines from the Ontario Fire Marshal, and if they make any suggestions, we'll modify the way we're doing training accordingly.
Okay, great. And so 2021, what's ahead for us in fire?
Well, again, the focus will be on training, and then we're waiting for our first allotment of SCB equipment. So that's our phase 1, and so a major project next year will be to move towards phase 2, which is the second part of the second set of gear.
All right, and any questions from council? Comments, concerns, thoughts about fire services? Anybody? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I just wonder if there is any specific requirements about fire master plan and if there are timelines associated with that, or it's just up to each municipality to work away at their plan and keep it updated.
Yes, so through you, Mayor, there is no legislative requirement for a master plan, but I believe our last plan was in 2015. So yeah, it definitely is time to review that plan.
And so we'll see that hopefully get underway in 2021. Okay, any other thoughts, questions on fire? Councillor Barry. You're on mute. Quote of the year.
I assume that we'll be in the control group for a while. Are there any recommendations or any needs going forward that you can think of with the control group?
No, we're now meeting every 2 weeks. Again, we're ready to adjust if conditions change, but I think we've got everything we need.
Yeah, we just in our meeting the other day we talked about. And sadly, the process of the control group is a bit old hat, and we spent, as I sent my note out to council, we spent the majority of that meeting talking about what the heck to do with rinks and how to follow the direction of public health in relation to that, and that some of these decisions are not as easy as one would think, and the rink in Dorset being on land jointly owned by 2 municipalities, one of which is in an orange zone and one of which is in a green zone, adds another complication. So the staff are in touch with the health unit and colleagues who are struggling with the same decisions. And that's what it's down to. In the beginning, our the EOC meetings were much longer because none of us knew what the heck we were doing, but we understand it better now. And it's uber focused on how do the recommendations from the province impact operations, and there's more stuff happening with council now because the EOC is less tied up with doing all the operational COVID related things. So there's a slow transition back to more things occurring at the council table instead of at the EOC. Not that the EOC was doing council work; they were just doing operational in relation to provincial direction. So we'll keep going with that. Okay, well, it doesn't look like there's an awful lot of challenge on what your plans are for 2021, Chief. So we'll thank you for your time, and we'll move on. Oh, hang on. Deputy Mayor Danielson's hand is up in the air.
Sorry. This isn't to challenge any of your priorities for next year. I just a quick question on the, is there a plan to dispose of the excess equipment that's parked at the end of the fire hall?
Yeah, we'll be putting that on, we've stripped the vehicle and we'll be putting that on Gov Deals this month.
It just looks a little sad sitting there.
Yes, especially with covered in snow too.
Yeah, I've had some public inquiry on that as well. So it'll be nice to for a decision to be made and to rehome that piece of equipment. Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Oh, hang on, Lisa Berry, go ahead.
All right, just a comment. If there was any apprehension about the clean and care program and the PPE and the breathing air fill station, I think COVID has definitely shown the definite need for doing all of that in-house. So even though it didn't get necessarily fully completed last year, I look forward to that in the coming year.
It currently is in-house as a replacement for that air system.
Sorry. I'm talking about the fill station and the washing machine.
Oh, the washing machine, yeah, for sure. Yeah, the fill station's in Station 80.
Okay.
But yeah, the washing machine, yeah, at the end, considering that the dryer is already in possession, that that should cut down on a lot of extra costs and a little more work for whoever's going to have to take care of all that. But yeah, nice to bring that in-house for sure. If there's nothing else, then I'll say thanks to the chief.
Thank you.
And we'll move into, thank you, and we'll move into our two biggest impacts. Parks, Rec and Trails is next, so we'll see Mr. Card appear. Mr. Card going to appear? Don't tell me he's on my screen because I can't see him. I don't see him. Oh, there he is.
He's there.
Good morning, Chris.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
So I think you've heard we have decided not to go into too much detail about 2020 because we've read the reasons why things haven't happened. However, if there's anything from 2020 that hasn't happened that you feel you need to provide some more detail on, we'd be certainly happy to hear that. And unless council has any questions on that, and then we are focused more on the go-ahead on 2021. So is there anything from 2020 that you want to highlight or further explain or provide any more detail for?
Yeah, a couple of things. For the most part, anything that we weren't able to complete obviously was largely due to the restraints with COVID, and most of them are being recommended to be deferred to next year. So one big one would be the swing set installation at the Oxtown Community Center, which I'd like to defer into next year. The other one was under project oversight and miscellaneous, and it was a funding application we had in for the Dorset Rink concept design and oversight. That funding did get denied. Now what that was an application to get funding to do several design concepts that we could then review, which would then inform some costing, which would then move us into some development phases around fundraising and those types of things. So there have been some recent developments with that discussion. The Dorset Lions, of course, are very much involved in that project. They've been fundraising in that regard for a couple of years now. And they did recently express that they would be interested in continuing the conversation when it makes sense to do so, given the constraints of where everything exists right now. So I just wanted to make council aware that we have reached out to Lake of Bays because it is the jointly owned property, and we're hoping to have some discussions with them before the end of the year or early into next year to just move that project forward and see what's possible. So council, depending on where that discussion goes and how it's affected by COVID and other projects, may see that come up as a discussion in 2021. Other than that, nothing specific to highlight outside of those for 2020.
Okay, so any questions from council on anything Chris has said or anything in his 2020 follow-up? Okay, Chris, if you can take us ahead into what your thoughts are for the coming year.
Of course. So starting with parks and trails, I'd like to do some improvements around the Frost Center access point for the hiking trail signage. Something that we've been noticing as a trend in the past couple of years, and even more so with COVID, is we're seeing a lot of new faces. For many years, a lot of these assets were used by longtime users, repeat users. As people are finding opportunities to recreate closer to home and within the province, there's more questions that we get just around access points, how to access hiking trails, certain roads for campsites, parking, those types of things. So I'd like to be able to just improve with some directional and informational signage at the start of the Frost Center hiking trail to better direct the increase in users and new users. And also ultimately the hope would be to reduce the amount of kind of in-person interactions we have to have answering questions that could be answered with that type of signage. Similar theme on campsites and installing regulation signage on campsites is around our rules and regulations, etc. We're noticing as people are getting into the activity of backcountry camping, there's a lot that they're learning about the appropriate ethics of garbage and refuse and where to go to the bathroom when you're backcountry camping and those types of things. So we'd like to develop signage to put on every campsite, which again will hopefully ultimately also help reduce some of the requirements for us to follow up with people, either with enforcement or cleaning up campsites. Same to be said for directional and parking signage on Sherbourne Road. In regards to playgrounds, not a lot going on there in the next year. As you know, we were able to upgrade our playgrounds very recently. So now we're really just kind of regular maintenance moving forward, which in this case is topping up our safety surfacing. There is a requirement under the CSA for certain depths of safety surfacing, and it's natural for the type of safety surfacing that we have for it to settle and compact over time, and it has to be regenerated. Mentioning the installation of the swing set at the Oxtongue Lake Community Center, again, something that we identified in this past year, and COVID restricted that from happening. One, in relation to proposing the addition of a seasonal trails technician and bylaw officer. And what this would look like is someone who through the winter would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday from November into the end of April, beginning of May, to assist with the weekend work where we're having the trails office open and at the same time maintaining ski trails and snow removal around those areas, etc. In the summertime, starting in May, that position would then become full-time, 40 hours, 5 days a week during what I call the peak operating season for backcountry camping. And they would run from May until November to assist in that time frame. We did start this discussion through monthly activity reports with council and identifying that with the increased usage this year, there was a need for additional staffing, and it is anticipated that that increased usage will continue through the winter and into next summer. But Also, just to highlight to council that since 2006, which we had the inception of the Water Trails program, we've seen continued growth in the anywhere from 8 to 15% annually in attendance every year. We have, as a department, changed the types of things that we're managing, and that we've become a much more robust parks department, where initially we were just the water trails. And essentially we have the same staff. So we're now well over 150% higher in attendance in all of our areas with the same staff base that we had back in 2006. So although COVID did this year exacerbate the need for the fact that we do need another seasonal and staff member, but it is a trend that we've been seeing over the past several years. So hoping to be able to get that person in place this year.
Any questions from Chris on this particular page, or for Chris on this particular page of this report? I wanted to ask, comment and ask that in light of the increases that we're seeing and the anticipation of increased outdoor recreation through the winter, there's opportunity. We had mentioned this before, that all kinds of people who may be trying the outdoors for the first time, or spending the winter at the cottage, or maybe a new property owner, will you be, I'm assuming you'll be working with the county to share the message widely that we have this fabulous trail system that's available just up the road?
Yeah, absolutely. We take all opportunities to spread the word about our trail systems. And funny enough, sometimes things like our ski trails, as an example, we have people coming from, the GTA, Ottawa. In a regular year, we even have people visiting from overseas, and it's surprising to find out that people just down the road didn't know that it was there. So finding opportunities to get the word out locally, and we do that in a number of ways, and it is a continuing ongoing thing. But even more recently, we've been having some more discussions at the county level with county tourism, and reviewing some of our pages that are on that website, and just doing updates based on the trends that we're seeing. And between us sharing information on opportunities to get the word out locally as well. So I think those relationships will continue to be built upon, and the new staff that we have in place, being our trails coordinator, has over the past year been able to get to know all of the players and be able to better get to know even some of the other local type accommodators and experience providers, and see how we can share information there. So absolutely.
Do you know, Councillor Dayu, do you have a question?
I do, but it's not directly related. So if yours is a follow-on, Mayor Moffat, then by all means.
Mine is. Thank you. Remind me to circle back, but I do see the CAO's hand that she's going to share something with us.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out to council that I had initial discussions with staff as well, and it's just very in the very beginning stages, but to explore an idea around Chris's proposed new position, being a bylaw position, whether or not it would be feasible to share that bylaw person between trails and the bylaw department. So those discussions have begun. We're just not sure if it is feasible or not. So just stay tuned on that.
Yeah, that's good to know, because we have been lamenting the fact, as I think has the public to a certain extent, that there's complaints that we don't do enough in certain areas, and our answer is, well, we don't have enough people to enforce what we put in place. But then we go ahead and put in place something like the fireworks bylaw, knowing full well that we don't have the people who are going to be up in the back end of the Quagga on a Saturday night. So, eventually, and we've talked about some very casually with some joint bylaw folks across the county, and that we need to remind ourselves, Liz, that needs to be a conversation that we pursue as part of the next steps for service delivery. Is how are we going to ensure that we can, manage the changes in the growth reasonably and efficiently? And that may be sort of a job share kind of thing might be the ideal way to start that. Deputy Mayor. You're on mute.
Right. I've actually got some concerns about the sharing. While I see the benefit, and I'm really glad to hear that those discussions are taking place, I've thought about this particular recommendation for additional staffing, and you know, I'm Chris's presentation today has sort of reinforced the need that there's been so much growth in trails, and yet our staff has not changed. And I would be concerned that if we try and split it out, that there would end up being quite a bit of conflict between the work that Chris is trying to get done, balanced against, oh God, we've got to get an inspection done here and here and here, and you know, the next thing you know, it's become a greater workload from inspections or enforcement than when Chris is hoping to achieve.
So the person wouldn't be an inspector, they would just be a bylaw enforcement officer. They wouldn't be
associated with trails.
Yes, but if they were, they would be bylaw enforcement associated with building and bylaw, but it would be the bylaw part of building and bylaw, I think, Madam CAO.
Yes, that's correct. And again, these are just very initial discussions, and whether or not those things would even be feasible. I just wanted council to be aware that we are looking at that, because we're aware that that there's a challenge in the building department as well as.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Just the only follow-up to that was that my thinking was that our trails department is not something that was any focus of the, I mean, there might be cooperation when it comes to trails across the county, but this is something that is completely unique to Algonquin Highlands. So I don't see, you know, other than the bylaw part of the challenge, I don't see there being too much change in our trails work, no matter what happens with coordinated projects between the municipalities.
Yeah, I don't disagree there at all. I wanted to, oh, Jen, I'm going to circle back to you.
Thank you. A bit of a new subject, but also seeing that the trails is a central part of the Algonquin Highlands identity. We have, on the last couple of years of projects and priorities conversations, batted the idea of rebuilding Beetle Lake Bridge. And I wonder where you're sitting as a department in that thinking, and whether it's maybe no longer feasible to even do a reduced version, or maybe it is feasible, but not for this year. If you could just let us know, you know, where that sits, that would be really great.
Sure. So this is a perfect example of, you know, why we need to increase our staffing. I'm noticing that any sort of project over and above essentially just regular daily maintenance is where we lose our capacity. And then we have to start to prioritize that. And when we were talking about this last year, and the Buttermilk Falls Trail came into the same type of discussion, and it was shortly after council had that review of the list of priorities, and both of those trails projects fell to the very bottom of that list of priorities. So I've been looking at it in this past year and a half since that discussion as on the bottom of the list of priorities. I think we need to build capacity in a staffing regard before we can look at those projects. The trail still exists, and yes, it is a little bit of a, you know, make do based on what was there originally, but the bridge is a massive undertaking, and it will, regardless of what format it takes, just because I have done some of the background research, it will be a multi-$100,000 project. You know, and this is where, when we're looking at asset management planning and projects fit in, I think now that we have the asset management plan and we can see what we need to accomplish over the next several years, we need to be able to react to that, build our capacity, and then start to work in those extra projects. So, is a long way of saying, unless council would like to prioritize that, I don't have any plans to change anything there in the very near future.
I think the important part is it stays as one of the floating balls. And I laughed, Jennifer, when you first brought that up, because that was the very next thing I was going to say. I've written down Bead Lake Bridge, so we were on the same page there. And so let's just make sure that we don't forget it and see when and how it becomes possible to move on that list. And I wanted to ask Chris, remind me, if you're talking about enhanced signage due to increased usage, we also, that includes the Poker Lakes, I would assume, which is in Minden Hills. And we manage that. I don't want to say for them, but with their approval. Is there a financial contribution toward that? Because signs aren't cheap. So does Minden Hills and or Lake of Bays, for that matter, around the Wren Lake side, is there any contribution that we can use to offset some of those signage costs?
No, there historically has not been any additional contribution from the other municipalities for those lands that we manage. It's always fallen within the operating expenses for the water trails. And when I say water trails, I'm including the portions within Lake of Bays, the portions within Minden Hills, and within our township. And we have always looked to offset our expenses with the water trails with the revenues, which we have been able to accomplish over the past several seasons. And that's the approach. But historically, no, and there haven't been any conversations in that regard.
So I guess that's the point, the sharp point in that conversation is that if we have gotten to a stage where the operation of those locations is, cost recovery, then it doesn't matter. If we were at a point where, Algonquin Highlands taxpayers were paying to put signs up in other places, that conversation might happen, but it sounds like maybe it doesn't need to at this point. So thank you for that. Anything else on this page for Chris? Liz, go ahead.
With respect to signs, it just kind of comes to mind that we had a bit of a discussion about signs at the shoreline preservation draft bylaw discussion, and there were some inclusions in that draft bylaw about how signs are attached to trees. I know that there was a recommendation that they not be removed if they've already been placed on trees, because there could be more damage than otherwise. But I just wondered, Chris, if you were aware of what's in that bylaw with respect to signs as they relate to being posted on trees.
No, I wasn't aware of that. I will have to review that, because we do place our campsite signage and our portage signage throughout the area on trees. So I will have to review that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Our county planner did say that there were safe methods that signs could be posted on trees, but I'm not sure of the details about that.
Yeah, keeping in mind that it's draft, in each of the conversations, it's been raised as a concern, particularly for us, because of the number of signs we have attached to trees for the water trail system specifically. So I know I mentioned that a couple of times, and that was the conversation, as Liz mentioned on Monday, was there are, of course, my somewhat facetious comment was, well, we're not going to start tying trail signs to trees with pretty raffia bows. And there are apparently other ways, but it's not a done deal. It's still out for comment. And don't forget that could form comments from us. I mean, we're allowed to comment in the bylaw as well. And that could be something that comes forward, is the logistics of that for I would imagine, hundreds of signs that are in existence attached to trees for the water trail system. And what would that be? What would that look like in terms of, FTEs? How much time would it take to replace all those? if that was the direction. There is a proposal for an exemption for certain aspects of the bylaw for municipalities, and there's, you know, some 50-50 on that as well. So just we'll just keep our eye on that. And so, Chris, you should have a look, and maybe Angie might be able to point you in the right direction on where that is in the bylaw, the proposed bylaw. So thanks for raising that, Liz. Were there any other hands for this page of Parks and Trails? Okay, we'll move to the next page, which starts with Parks and Trails continued. And Chris, take it away.
I could have made 16 slides of just parks and trails. I had to choose the big ones. So removal of degraded pavilion at Hawk Valley Park. There is 2 small parks along Big Hawk Lake Road on the Canisius River that the township owns and maintains. They're most popular for people accessing the river to go tubing. People will park there and hop in their tubes and do a lazy float down the river down to Elvin Johnson Park there. One of those 2 parks has a very old structure that's essentially a picnic pavilion that has reached the end of its life. This was something that was identified during the asset management planning reviews. So it does need to be removed at this time. And then I'd like to have a discussion at that same time with council on whether or not we want to replace that structure or naturalize that area. So my plan would be to and then have the discussion about replacement. And if we did replace, it would be in 2022. Sean already mentioned the property severance and merger for Oxtongue Community Center, but what I'd also like to do there is, now that we, and as part of that swing set project and getting the outhouse finalized there, and in addition to our beautiful pavilion, the green space that's there is currently anything but. It's just kind of a sandy area on the property we have back behind the community center. I'd like to be able to level that out, put in some topsoil, get some grass growing to create a space for our events, and also a space that people could use while they're there picnicking to, you know, throw a ball around or play some soccer. The kids just run around, etc. That's what I'm planning there. Development of updated software for Water Trails reservation system for 2022 release. So I discussed this briefly in the report at last council meeting when we entered another 5-year agreement with Camus, which is our reservation software provider. And we will, over this next year, be moving to their upgraded software system, which is a fabulous system. We've already gone through presentations and reviews of it. It's not going to have any cost to the township, but it is going to take a significant amount of staff time. We're going to have the opportunity to update all of our campsite parameters on the reservation system. Our online reservation system is interactive. You can interact with the map, you can click on campsites, you can see photos, you can check availability, you can make and change reservations, etc. All of the photos that we have on that are from a time when, you know, the best camera you could get was a point and shoot, you know, 8 pixel type unit. And so we'd like to, over this year, get some better camera equipment, which council will see as a smaller item in the budget, and start updating all of those photos, all of those parameters over the whole year.
And in regards to that, being a photographer, for the purposes of the photographs for campsites, an iPhone should be more than adequate, as opposed to a camera that has manual settings and needs download and whatnot. So if I don't know what version your phone is, I have an 11, and the pictures I take with it are extraordinary for a phone. They're not nearly the 54 meg pictures I take with my Sony A9, but I think we need to think seriously about buying a camera, like a DSLR, versus just using a better cell phone. So I would look forward to, you know, a little more conversation on that. Cameras get out of date quickly, and they're way more expensive than they can be, far more expensive than the replacement phone system that the township has as part of its package. So just a cautionary note there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they should be updated for sure.
Yeah, and we were looking at options for DSLRs with the intent of also considering possibilities for good images for advertising. You know, ski trail images. We're working on advertising for those types of things. Our imagery is essentially just off of cell phone. We work options. However, I do completely understand what you're saying, and also with this year, you know, the budget constraints that we may be looking at just also may not make that possible, considering the cell phone setups that we have. So we can have some more, or you know, I can look at that in the budget and essentially make a final decision at budget draft.
Yeah, because a DSLR can certainly give you a higher megapixel photograph, but if it's going to be used on automatic all the time, anyway, different conversation for a different day. In an area of significant interest and knowledge for me, but anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask, just put out to council too, and to you, Chris. A couple of years ago, there was, and you're talking about grass, you know, the grass area at Oxton Lake for the swing set and making it, you know, evening it out. A couple of years ago, it was suggested that we install put a utility shed up at Oxton Lake to keep the lawnmower and a few things, because as it stands now, staff have to drive it all up there. At that time, the answer from council was a resounding no. And I'm just wondering if there's any appetite for consideration of that. Is there any budgetary opportunity, and is that the direction we should go, so that staff don't have to, you know, take or float equipment up there to do the maintenance? So I would just put that out there for consideration, and could either ask council for thoughts now or leave it with staff to think about. You know, a little shed with stuff in it also becomes a target. But Madam CAO.
That would be something that council would need to propose under Adam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so so if Chris is going to plant grass, then we need to ask Adam how he's going to mow it. Okay, so Chris, please carry on. We're at Dorset Tower. Any further questions on this, Jennifer?
Yes, just before we move on, I wonder if I could slip in a little bug in your ear for future consideration, Chris. When you've written here, Oxton Lake Community Center green space improvements, establish grass. If I might channel the Environment and Stewardship Committee for a moment, I suspect what they would say if we were meeting is, could we think about alternate ground cover to grass? Grass isn't the best environmental product to put anywhere on the planet. There are some really lower maintenance than grass alternatives out there, which provide better habitat for insects and you know, are better for pollinators and frankly can look better too. Could we just investigate whether any of those alternatives might be an option for Oxton Lake instead of immediately going into grass?
Chris?
And through college, my background was environmental sciences and largely in part landscape ecology and restoration. And funny enough, you know, these types of topics would take up entire lecture series. And in this particular instance, it's, you know, take any sort of input from the Environmental and Stewardship Committee, but the intent would be to create essentially like a sports field or an area for that, and which lends itself nicely to grass. But I mean, there's things like clover and certain other types of ground covers that certainly don't require as much maintenance. I mean, the least amount of maintenance that you see people doing in some cities is what they call a rock garden, just cover it all in gravel, but that wouldn't be so nice to run around and slide on.
No.
It's up to council. We could talk to the Environment and Stewardship Committee, see if they'd like to be involved in that conversation. You know, off the top of my head, the best alternatives are clover. So that would be a great alternative option. You know, grass or clover.
I think it's important. I think it's important that the consideration be given, given all the other measures we've undertaken and the ideas we've got floating around with regards to the environment and being good stewards of it. It's also an opportunity, perhaps, for you know, a greater conversation about, maybe it's not about having a big green square of whatever. Maybe it's a greener space, as Jen has said, and maybe toward the back where the forest is, it doesn't get mowed, and there's a little pollinator place that doesn't require maintenance. It's just natural. It's where you let all the black-eyed Susans grow for all the wee bugs. And I think there's opportunity there to think about it at the front end, so the back end is appealing. And those conversations, I'm hoping that in the spring we are able to have Zoom meetings of committees, because there's committee work to be done. And I think there's some committee opportunity there for the right thing. Certainly, Chris, sounds like you've got the educational background as well. So, I mean, I see it as being an opportunity for conversation at the front end. And I see Liz's hand, and then I see Lisa's hand. Liz, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my first inclination was to say, well, as Chris said, we're aiming for you know, a play area, a field area. I like the idea of clover, and I accept that, you know, grass is not the greatest, certainly in areas where there's waterways or lakes. I mean, that plays a big part of the shoreline preservation bylaw. But I do also like Carol's thought about a mixture where you've got play space and a naturalized area. And I think that can be done quite attractively and sort of achieve both goals. I'd hate to see us get bogged down in too much conversation about, you know, a field.
Yeah, well, and we're not going to, because I'm going to say, after we hear from Lisa, I'm going to say to Chris, well, you've heard what council's talking about, and away you go and think about that. But Lisa, what have you to say on that?
I fully support it. I think it's a great idea to be to think differently on a green space, and I support more discussion on it down the road.
So, Chris, you've heard what council said, so just consider that as you develop your plans. I think would be great, and it would meet. It would serve the purpose of a number of directions that we're taking as council and as a municipality. So let's not jump to one conclusion. Let's take a little bit of time to consider some others and put our money where our mouth is. Okay, so carry on then for, where are we? Grass, software, tower.
Yes. So couple of relatively big things at the tower. Council will recall we did apply for funding for a number of projects at the tower, both of which would be a combination of improvement initiatives for things like parking and park space and green space, but also a number of items that with maintenance for asset management planning. And in the most recent engine, we get them done every 2 years. We just had one completed. The one prior to that had identified a number of things, and we were able to address a number of those this year in virtue of the tower not being occupied. And the next major pieces would be the lightning protection system on the tower itself. So there was one existing at one time. It's no longer functional. I'm not sure what happened. In fact, it predates me, but there's components of it that are there and components of it that are missing. And so that needs to be assessed, and it needs to be designed and redone. This will both be a safety consideration for users of the tower. It would actually deflect a lightning strike down into the ground and dissipate it. but also protect our equipment. This past year, we did have a lightning strike on the tower. It fried our generator, it fried a number of pieces of electronics. We had cell phone providers who utilized the tower had equipment fried as well, so it would also protect that. Also, as part of the asset management planning process, Peekaboo Rock, the stairs there, it's a wooden and platform structure that's quite dated, and it has we've been able to maintain it to what I would consider beyond the end of its useful life, and it is now time to replace it. There are a couple options I was considering that I'd like to make council aware of and just see where the appetite lies, and it may have to be discussed further once we see costing, but in our application for funding, we were considering an improvement initiative there in upgrading the wooden structure into a landscaped type setup. Obviously, the landscaped setup is going to be have a higher cost associated with it. What we did cost in the asset management plan is a replacement of like for like, but we are talking about well over 2 to 3 times the amount if we were to go to a landscape type setup, and then we are into the $100,000 plus range. So looking for thoughts just up front from council, and I know it's very difficult because of all of the things that identified in the asset management plan and where we're going to fall once we see budget, but would there be an appetite for an improvement initiative there in the form of some landscaping?
I mean, I think it's an ideal opportunity to look at it, seeing as we don't know what the costs or other implications would be. So for council, this is one of those things that, does Chris go ahead and do some work on it or not? I know that there are some other opportunities for, potential partnership in the community around projects like this. Don't want to say anything out loud, but there are others that we could perhaps ask to participate in such a project. And I would like to, Chris, you'll recall, and members of council may, that we had a delegation a number of years ago from the Aging Well Committee, and they had taken it upon themselves to do an aging well audit in Algonquin Highlands, and we're the beneficiaries of quite a bit of good information. And one of them, in particular, I recall, was the railing at Peekaboo Rock. It's a 2x4 on its side. And so for older, frailer hands, that a smaller railing would be better. So hopefully, if there were any other recommendations from the Aging Well Committee, as specifically around Peekaboo Rock, I think there were a couple of them, that if any work is done, that we take that into consideration as well to accommodate folks who may need a little extra help there. Thoughts from council on Chris's idea of looking at some options there? Councillor Shortreed.
Actually, I think it's a really good idea. It's so steep there. I mean, the stairs there now are well spaced and low, but there's such a huge area there that's not usable because it is so steep. So looking at that might make a huge difference on what you can and can't do. And even when you get to the bottom, I get afraid when you're at the fence. Because to me, the fence doesn't even seem sturdy enough, but that's just my afraid of heights.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts from other members of council on what direction you'd like Chris to go on this particular project? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Yeah, I'd really like to see a little bit more work done and see what we can come up with for that area. I agree with what Julie's saying, and it's interesting about the handrails from the Aging Well group.
Mm-hmm. I'm full of stories about things like that. Any other thoughts on that idea? So I'm going to assume that's a go. And remember, this is just giving Chris approval to look at it, but we'll have to shake it all out at dollar time for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that sounds like a yes to pursue that a little bit, Chris. And then we've got LED, we've got Christmas lighting changes.
Yeah, and I wanted to put this on there just to highlight. I mean, it's not a huge project. It's not a huge amount of money, but we are, as an organization, committed to reducing as much as possible the amount of energy that we use and becoming more efficient. So this is one of those opportunities, and we're still utilizing, you know, the old style of Christmas lights up on the tower. So we'd like to just redesign the tree light system up on the tower and upgrade it to an LED lighting system this year.
Would that be in time for the 9th?
No, not a chance. there will be, everything's in place as far as lighting at this point, but there won't be new lighting.
Okay, any thoughts from council on anything on this page for Chris? I am going to ask, Chris has one more page left, so I guess we can finish up with Chris. He's got a lot, and then we'll get our teeth into Public Works after a break. Is that okay with council? Let's finish up with Chris and then have a break. All right, Chris, if you take us to your last page, starting with docks and landings.
Yes, thank you. So following our last discussion with council, referring to kind of the big picture discussion with docks and landings, internally, we have since then been having some further discussions. And at this time, I do want to develop a framework essentially around how to move forward with assessing and developing and improving or upgrading and just in some cases just replacing existing infrastructure. A number of the pieces of infrastructure, of course, are in the asset management plan, and it will be an annual conversation over the next several years just around what to prioritize and how and when. But what I'd like to do, and starting at the December 10th council meeting, is start to have that discussion with some specific parameters on the development of a framework for how we move forward. And I picture at the next council meeting, that discussion will start. We'll be able to essentially identify the parameters, and then there will be some discussions that follow that which formalize those parameters. So it will be something that happens over several meetings and potentially over the year. At the same time, we'll be able to develop the next move for the Skin Lake Landing, which is prioritized in the asset management plan in need of replacement at this time. So this year, we will be going through the design, the environmental permit approval, the tender process. My experience with that whole process is typically you are up to a year just developing all of that, particularly around the environmental improvements, which can take approvals, which can take some time. And then the project itself would be completed in 2022.
Yeah, these are big projects. I'm just going to break in there, Chris. Deputy Mayor Danielson has her hand up.
Forgive me about not knowing the extent of the work required there, but is it a big project? Like, would it be equal to Hardwood Landing, or you know, is this something that we need to have a discussion about before we start working on this project?
It would be similar in many aspects to Hardwood Landing, in that similar infrastructure and similar uses, being a retaining wall, a dock, a boat launch, a parking area, shoreline boat storage, and at this time it's the retaining wall and the dock that need replaced, that have reached the end of its life, and the most immediate requirement for a decision and will be really around whether or not we'd be replacing like for like in relation to that wall, or if we'd be looking at recommendations for a change there. As far and by change, you know, it could mean a number of things. It could mean just a change in the materials. It could be a change in the size. It could be a change in the type of docking or the location of the docking, or it could be a decision just to replace like for like, exactly as is existing. But it has reached the end of its life. It is a safety concern. We have, over the past couple of years, been able to do some work essentially to, for lack of a better word, stop it from falling into the lake. And so we will have to make a decision just on how robust we'd like that to be.
And so the framework for assessing projects will factor into what happens there, you know, and anyway, we'll see what Chris is recommending in December. And we do have challenges, many challenges right across the province, but we don't govern the province, the township. And so it's important to have that framework first so that we can answer exactly some of the questions Chris has swirling around in his head. What direction are we going to go in? And remember, it's also not a matter of, you know, if everybody gets a kitten and their favorite gum. There are projects that are going to come forward where council will have to consider doing less on that in that location, and those reasons will have to, you know, be clearly outlined and discussed at that time. Councillor Dayu.
Shoreline naturalization being the priority that it is in the county and in the township, and for all the best reasons. I wonder if there is scope in your thinking through of this project and in future projects to actually include a thought, even in one line, on shoreline naturalization as part of the larger proposal. So, you know, in X landing, unfortunately, there are no opportunities that present themselves for shoreline naturalization. Or in Y opportunity, yeah, we could probably naturalize 4 additional feet, just so that we're always remembering the importance of that and our obligation to it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And can you remember, Jen, to bring that up again when we talk about Chris's proposal for the framework for assessing and the discussion? I think that's where that can live quite nicely, and let's not forget that belongs there. There's a lot of considerations.
Absolutely count on me to bring it up again. Yes.
Excellent. So I don't have to ask you to take a note. Liz, did you have your hand up?
No.
Did anybody else? I thought I saw someone else's hand in the air. Oh, it was Chris. Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and I am making notes as we go along here as well, Councillor Dayu, and that's the exact type of input that, you know, I am looking for when we start to develop these conversations. And that's what I mean when I say, you know, developing the parameters. And one of those first steps will be developing the parameters by which we assess. And that may form more discussion around that specific thing, but essentially we need to start to itemize those parameters. And so absolutely.
Okay, do you want to carry on to water systems then?
Yeah, so things are going great with our water systems, and I should knock on wood, but all I'm proposing for this year is a water analysis at the Door Center, and that is I don't moment a recent analysis which breaks down essentially. Sorry, it says my internet connection is unstable, so if you lose me, please say so. It breaks down all.
We lost you.
The water quality parameters to those parameters.
So Chris, can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
How is it now? Is that good?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You need to, you did just freeze in, it just reminded me of that new ad that's on TV about people doing yoga. Can you say all that little bit just again, because we didn't get it?
Yeah, so reviewing water quality parameters at the well there relative to the treatment equipment. We do have a couple of pieces of treatment equipment that I'd just like to review because they are getting to a point that they will need to be replaced. So this will help inform future decisions for equipment required at the Dorset Recreation Center.
Okay, and any thoughts, questions on that? Okay, carry on.
Yes, and I apologize, this next one, looking at event stage, I had taken this out and it's made it onto the final draft. So it's something we are considering, and just in a nutshell, what it is a portable type event stage that we'd be able to utilize both at the Dorset Rec Center and at other areas throughout the township that would replace our big wooden structures that are A, hard to move, and B, take up a significant amount of storage space. However, it is something that I'm looking at within budget, and I may or may not bring back. So equipment, nothing major on schedule this year. We had a discussion around the snowmobile at last council. I have ordered that for January delivery, and the only other item is replacing our utility canoe, which is one of our canoes that staff utilize to do campsite and portage maintenance.
Okay, any questions from council on the remainder of Chris's presentation? Liz, go ahead, please.
Just a quick comment. I like the idea of at least investigating the event stage, particularly if what we have is awkward, bulky, and hard, hard to move around. But I guess that definitely depends on the bottom line after you've looked into it.
Yeah, and it's funny, different perceptions, because my first thought was, well, we don't need that, and there's no events happening. But there could be later in the year. I have to say that because the one we have is, yes, it's cumbersome and a bit unwieldy, that it needs replacing at some point. However, there have been events, the events that used to happen in the community are very different now. And this is something that I would probably put in the parking lot if it comes forward. But anyway, we'll wait for that conversation. Just my point is just different perceptions and the reasons why. So that's why we have fulsome discussion. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, my first thought upon hearing that was, oh yeah, I remember a couple of the fundraising opportunities that had been proposed from one community committee or another for this last summer, two of which would have absolutely benefited from that stage. So there might be some rental opportunities there. I don't know how you can figure that, but there may be a cost recovery component.
You mean rent out like to the public?
That was my thinking. Yes. Is that not the right direction?
It's up to council. I'm a bit of a Grinch around that. It's my firm belief that most things come back broken or missing pieces. But anyway, we're not talking about event stages today. We'll leave that for Chris to bring forward at budget time, and we can have he can flesh out some ideas around that for sure. Lisa Berry.
It's funny how we all interpret things differently. My thing with, I think just with my COVID hat on, was thinking, well, is this something that could be used outside? Because I don't think we're meeting inside anytime soon, but people are still looking for creative ways to be outside. So my thought is, oh, wouldn't that be neat if that could be an outside opportunity?
Yeah, so three very different thoughts, all interesting in their own way. So, that's the point of being here. But this is like the mashed potatoes discussion for the big dinner. Liz Danielson.
Actually, I was thinking about it as an outside thing too. Still think it's a good idea, but and also.
Who knew there'd be so much interest in a possible event stage? So exciting. Okay, Chris, you've heard what council's thoughts are on that, so we'll leave that with you. Any final thoughts, comments, questions, clarifications for Mr. Card and his department? Okay, Chris, we'll thank you for your time, and And council will take a break. It is 12 minutes to 11, so let's come back at 11 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, we are reconvened. Welcome back. Our final presentation for projects and priorities today is Adam Thorne, Public Works. Adam, like I've said to everybody else, I think you've been listening. So we've all had had a look at your presentations, all the presentations. So we're kind of going to skim over the completed, like the current year stuff, unless there's something that you'd like to highlight for us or anything that's changed. And then we'll just get into plans for the coming year. So take it away.
Yes, thank you very much. No, there's really nothing to highlight. Just I'm really proud of what we've accomplished this year, given the circumstances that we all face through the departments. And yeah, really proud of my team and coworkers and staff of what we've been able to accomplish. So that was really great. So no, there's nothing else that I'd really like to speak to as far as project's completion.
Okay, then if you can just take us away into 2021, what we're looking at.
Sure. So we'll start right out with road reconstruction and single surface treatment. What I would like to schedule for this year is the continued of the road reconstruction of North Shore Road. That's the project that I brought to council in a report that we had finished the geotechnical survey, and we're moving forward with the survey of the land in that area, which was completed. And then the next step was to do a design plan, which is being currently worked on by the engineer, is putting that together for us. And then that will be brought back to council for further discussion on the design plan. The design plan will speak to things like whether the road has to be moved in any direction, what kind of bank stabilization we would be looking at in the 4 areas that is there, future drainage, tree removal and tree planting, things of that nature that the design plan would speak to. As far as the surface treatment, as you know, we do 3 types of surface treatment. We do double surface treatment, which is a reconstruction of a road. So we won't be reconstructing any roads this year other than the North Shore Road plan. So the single surface treatment we will be looking at this year is approximately 10 kilometers of roads, which is on average what we try to complete each year. So it's on par with previous years. We were looking at doing potentially 1 kilometer of a single surface treatment, and then 100 meters of a single surface treatment as well on another road that we maintain.
Adam, I wanted to ask for North Shore Road, what's the, I know it's been discussed briefly, but what's the plan, not the details, but the advance notice for affected property owners, especially if there's any requirement of removal of infrastructure, stairs or pump houses or anything of the like?
Yeah, of course. So once the survey was completed, it has been completed. It'll be placed into the design plan. And from there, we'll know exactly what locations. We know right now that there's 4 locations, obviously, but we'll know exactly the location of each section. So how many properties that will directly affect and the infrastructure that's currently in place. Once that design plan is brought forward and we can agree on how that's going to go. After that, we can reach out and start planning on notifying any landowner or anybody that's in the vicinity that has put any kind of infrastructure on the road shore allowance.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions on these, the reconstruction project and the single surface treatment projects that Adam has identified on this page? Okay, take us through bridges, next page.
So bridges, this year, what I'd like to plan is some curbing, so replace some of the curbing on Bear Lake. It was part of the 5-year work plan that we put together for the Bear Lake Bridge. So this would be the next steps of that. The Buckslide Dam Bridge, it was noted in 2018 OSIM report that there was some undermining of the concrete of the bridge itself on the outlet side. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get that investigated yet, so that will continue into next year and be completed. And then the St. Peter's Bridge is there's some drainage tubes that need to be replaced. And this scope of work was identified in the 2018 and 2019 OSIM report. So it's just part of us moving through what gets identified in the report, and then we make the fixes on each location or each infrastructure.
Okay, any questions from council on bridges? Bridges. I guess that, I mean, it's pretty cut and dried. If it's identified in the OSIM report, then it shall be done. So it's fairly straightforward there. Equipment purchases and surplus. Oh, Deputy Mayor Danielson has her hand in the air. Please go ahead.
I just, forgive me for asking, but what is a drainage tube associated with a bridge? Maybe I should know that, but I don't.
Yeah, so what happens is in the expansion joint of the bridge, water can collect in it, and each year we go and we clean that out as it builds up with sand. So each year in the spring we go and clean that out so that the bridge can move around a little. And at the end of each expansion joint, there is a drainage tube that's inside there that allows the water to drain down through it, and then it drains over onto land as opposed to dropping it directly into the water body below.
Thank you.
Yeah, because my first thought around things like that is going back to the, shoreline restoration and lake health and preservation, is making sure that there is some way for the road salt that gets used in the salt sand mix to find another home before it ends up in the waterway.
Mm-hmm.
So just a comment there. Anything else on bridges before we move on? Okay, now we are equipment purchases.
So equipment purchases for this year is smaller than most years. What we are looking at purchasing this year would be, it's the end of a life, service life for one of our half-ton pickup trucks in the maintenance department or the maintenance side of Public Works. So I'd like to replace that pickup truck with a 3/4 ton pickup truck, and also have a dump box insert, very similar to the one that you see here. Not brand specific, but very similar to the one that's in the slide itself. So this will create a lot of efficiencies in the department, and also allow staff to not have to be borrowing trucks from from the roads guys when they're using the 1-ton trucks that we're replacing. So this will help out on the maintenance side of Public Works. In addition to that, we have the 2 single axle dump trucks that we replaced that we'll be replacing in 2021. That tender closed a week or two ago and was awarded, and we're just now waiting for the trucks to arrive, which should be in mid-February.
Good. Any questions from council on equipment purchases and surplus? Liz, go ahead, please.
Not a question, just that I really like the idea of the 3/4 ton with the box insert. I think that's a really good idea. I can see how that'll work well.
Thank you.
Building upgrades, maintenance, and repairs. Quite a few things on here.
So as we move forward into the buildings, Public Works has taken more of a role on the maintenance of planning and executing the maintenance on the buildings. And so that's why you'll see a couple more buildings in here than what we've had in the past. The library, we're going to be continuing on with the accessible lift. We're still waiting on a couple items with it, but hopefully moving forward with it very shortly. The Stanhope Community Center, we did do the parking lot lines last year. It's recommended that they're done, if it's the first time, you do them 2 years in a row, and then you start skipping them out every other year. So if we can get them completed again this year or in 2021, they will last a lot longer. So there's line painting. The new outdoor water fill station unfortunately wasn't completed this year. So that will be put on next year's plan. And then the stone replacement on the front of the building will be put on next year's plan. The Dorset garage insulation was one that was not completed this year. So it was, I'd like to move it into 2021 and have it completed. The Stanhope Museum, when we went through the project of this year, we found that the windows in the Stanhope Museum were not repairable. We've left them as they are and boarded it up, and the maintenance staff actually made it look like there's windows there if you're driving by, but it's actually boarded up right now, so no weather can get in and cause any further damage. Quite creative, I'd say. So we'd like to look at replacing the 4 windows at the museum. At the Dorset Rec Center, we're currently working on the HVAC system. That would be the big project for 2021, is that HVAC system, which we're currently working with the engineer on a design plan to take to tender for the installation of that. The Dorset Museum, the roof, the flat roof, it's been identified that the flat roof has quite a few marks in it and some wear marks, and needs to be replaced. It's every year we're up there in the spring and fall trying to patch it. So we would be looking at replacing the flat roof on the Dorset Museum. Station 70 Fire Hall, it was identified in the asset management plan about the steel beam that's currently there. Although it's been there for as long as it has been, it was identified that there was no engineer stamp of approval on the beam itself. So an engineer has come in and looked at it and recommended that it does get replaced. So we have the beam, it just hasn't been put in yet. So that will be completed in 2021. The Oxtown Community Center, the rear entrance redesign is just simply making it a lot easier to get out of the building from the rear. So it's just a matter of cleaning up the current area and leveling out the stair, the concrete stair that's at the back, and putting in some gravel to allow for easy access or egress from the building. And then the main office, as was brought up earlier, was the basement renovation to increase office space. We looked at the basement downstairs quite a few times and have come up with a couple ideas on it. So if that is approved, we were going to come back with a design plan for the basement so that council could see what that would look like. And I know I was listening earlier about the concerns of lighting, and Angie spoke to it very well, that we do plan on putting up some glass inside between the 2 offices to allow some natural light to deflect into the building or into the office itself. As far as the extra last part here is the collaboration with the county. We've been working with the county through the climate change plan. And one of the initiatives that they're looking at doing is installing EV chargers, so electric vehicle chargers at some locations within the township. Now, we do have a meeting planned in December, which is where I will be able to obtain more information regarding the EV chargers. But it's at this point, it would be looking at potentially installing one dual system charger at predetermined locations that would allow for at least 2 vehicles to be plugged in and charged. These chargers are universal, so any electrical vehicle could pull up to them and plug into them. It's not brand specific, so it would have multi-use on it. And that's in a nutshell kind of what we're looking at for buildings in 2021.
I have about 4 questions. Looking for any thoughts or comments from council, clarifications needed anywhere. Councillor Dayu.
Adam, is there any hope that the reconfiguration of the rear entrance to the Oxtongue Lake Community Centre is the silver bullet required to increase the maximum number of people back in the building up to 70 again? Do you know, or could we find out, does that satisfy fire codes requirements in order to increase that number back up again?
If I may, my experience with fire code and building code and occupancy is strictly on building size, not so much entrances and exits. Obviously, there's a code to what you can have for an entrance, exit, etc. But I don't believe that it would increase any occupancy regarding that. The entrance itself is not changing. It's the exterior side of it that we're making it a little easier for access. So I would have to say no, that it would not increase the occupancy.
A girl can always hope.
I wanted to ask about the, I think actually it's on the, it's 2 pages back. I didn't ask at the time. In terms of the work at the Buckslide Dam, if you're doing work below water levels, I assume that means bringing in commercial divers or a commercial diver to do that work. Is that correct?
That is correct. Whether it's a commercial diver or not, I think it would be more of a joint effort to have it investigated and then potentially work with the waterways to close the dam off so that the work could be done and then opened it back up again. The water level is not, obviously we've all seen it, the water runs down there through there quite fast, which would make it swift water. And I would have to say that we would want to close that dam off to do the work. Maybe not so much the investigation, but the work itself. And that would be predetermined through the project process.
Okay, thank you. And in regards to the museum windows, I'm wondering if they're, if that, and I don't know if for budget purposes, the museums have been assigned to Adam and also for project purposes. And Angie let me know that a couple of weeks ago that the museums don't have a staff lead. So Adam's certainly not going to, you know, get his heritage hat on, but in terms of making sure that budgets, particularly in relation to potential projects, are accounted for, so they're kind of going to go through Adam. And so in relation to that, the museum window work, will that be coming from that museum's reserve, or will it be on the levy or from somewhere else? Where's it coming from? Anybody know that?
I would have to say Jeannie would be able to speak to that much better than I can, but given that the project itself in 2020 was the roof and the paint removal, I do believe that came from reserve, so I can only assume it would be from a reserve as well. I don't have costing on the windows, and it depends on how the approach we take with the windows. When we were looking at the roof, you know, we come to find out that that cedar shake roof was not the original roof. It actually had shingles on it. So we went back to a shingle architectural style. So although we want to keep within a heritage look and a heritage style, the new windows to be replaced in there, I don't see that cost being overly high, as long as we're not trying to get into specially made windows, which I didn't get that feeling when I spoke to the committee about it very briefly. So it'll just be a matter of talking to them further and then coming up with a plan on design. So again, to answer your question, I believe that would be from the reserve. Those windows would be replaced.
And so because, sorry, Jeannie, go ahead. I see your hand.
I was just going to concur that there would be monies in the reserve for those windows.
Well, there is money in the reserve for the windows, but the reserve has been set up for a completely different reason. And so I think we need to talk about, not today, there's an awful lot of, you know, committee work and input on projects that needs to occur. And we have to figure out a way to either allow those meetings to happen or I don't know. There's going to have to be, we talked today about Environment and Stewardship Committee could have some thoughts. the Oxton Lake Committee was permitted to meet once on site at a distance to undertake a project that allowed some items in this presentation, not Adam's, but Sean's presentation to occur. So I would like us, because our volunteers put so much work into the various committees that they sign up for, I think it's only fair at some point to find a way to work with them or keep them informed about what's going on. I would hate for something to just be done and the committees learn about it later on sometime. So, but we can have a conversation, or you guys can sort that out maybe behind the scenes about how what can the process be? It came up even with budgets. So, you know, our committees, our two museums in particular, have to submit their proposed budgets for the year, but they can't meet to set a budget. So it's kind of a guessing by golly budget for each of them. And while that's understandable, all we need is a bottom line for their budget submissions. I think that some of the details of the projects that would be contained in there, especially in regard to taking some reserve money, I would like to see a little more communication there, and perhaps Angie and Adam, you can brainstorm what that might look like, and let us know. I saw a hand waving around there. Was that you, Deputy Mayor? Go ahead, please, Liz.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the money for the windows coming out of reserves. As you said, I think it was intended for other purposes, and I'd like to have a little bit further discussion about whether it should come out of reserves or be on the levy, but we'll see.
I think our first budget discussion will help identify where that money might come from. I don't disagree with it coming from the reserve, given the pressures that we're going to see in the coming budget. But let's just make sure that we talk about it. And the other question, Adam, is follow up from Chris's presentation. He wants to make some sort of green stuff on the ground up at Oxton Lake. That's to be discussed later. You may recall a couple of years ago there was a suggestion that in order to make maintenance easier, that there be a utility shed at Oxton Lake where there would be some maintenance tools and lawnmower, et cetera, and just can you keep in mind whether or not that's an idea that's come to its own reality, or what are your thoughts on that?
I'm actually glad you brought that up. Thank you, because I did take some notes on that when you guys were talking about it earlier. I would have to say at this point, the way that the maintenance is set up, it's more efficient to bring the material or bring the items with them. We don't have enough lawn tractors to leave one there. The way that our current system is set up is that we have our crews go from basically all the way from the airport all the way up to Oxton, obviously not in the same day, but that's how much we cover. So when we have and this is part of our planning. I know you've seen a lot of equipment, you've seen a lot of things come along recently, and that's part of our planning where we have trailers designed to haul this material. We have trucks designed to haul this. We have the equipment designed for these areas, and they're multi-use. If it was just a single lawnmower and maybe a little weed whipper, we could look at something like that. But because of all of our equipment is more on the larger industrial size, and we use it throughout the municipality from one end to the other, it's not beneficial for us to keep items at one location unless it's a storage unit like the airport has. We do store some of our maintenance equipment there if we're leaving it over the weekend or we're going to be coming back to it the next day. But as far as a small shed just to store it so it's there, it's not efficient for our department.
Okay, fair enough. And the other thing I wanted to mention, I'm very interested to see the charging stations turn up on your presentation. And I'm glad to hear that there's going to be more conversation, because I asked the question when it came up. It is a natural outcome of the county's plan that we've certainly signed on for. I asked the question about the charging stations, and the answer was that there would be more coming later. So I would have been very surprised if the more coming later hadn't, and it was just turned up in a budget. So look forward to hearing the outcome of those continued conversations, because it was asked, and at that time there just wasn't any definitive answer. So I'm glad to see the conversations have continued, and look forward to hearing more on that. Is there any other questions on building upgrades, maintenance, and repairs for Public Works? Councillor Barry. You are now muted. Yeah, you're unmuted. There you go.
Right. It isn't really a budget or priority, but just a curiosity question. Would it be possible, since we can't go in right now, but for there to be some visual photographs of the extension onto the museum in Dorset?
Chris was taking care of, as we transitioned from 2020 into 2021 and as the start of 2020, as the building maintenance and capital projects and stuff were slowly being brought into Public Works. That was one project that Chris had spearheaded. And through our conversation, we left that with Chris to continue because his knowledge of it was much more vast than mine was. So I would have to say that I can speak to Chris about that and see, I'm sure he's listening. And maybe we can bring something back for pictures, just to give a tour or even maybe of it. And I'd be happy to work with Chris on that.
Okay, thank you.
And so whether it's photographs or a walkthrough, and I'm going to, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to lean over and ask the county IT person. Could a staff person have Zoom on their phone and do like a walkthrough, and then we could just, okay, the answer is yes. That's maybe a better representation, Lisa, is if that's not too much trouble, Chris could do a walkthrough with his phone on Zoom, and we would watch him on the screen and he'd walk us through the addition. That's another idea. But yeah, we haven't seen it, right? So that's a good idea to see if we can see what works out there. Okay, anything else on this page? This page. Okay, next is Aeropuerto. Adam, what's going on at the airport this year?
So this year with 2021, again, we'd be moving into the second coat of line painting in the parking lot and out in the airfield to clean that up. The fuel system upgrades. We had planned for fuel system upgrades in 2020, and as we moved through the year, obviously with COVID and with an employee leaving and hiring a new one and getting them, used to our location and how we operate, we're just now getting to the fuel system. We were kind of hoping the asset management plan would have spoke to the fuel system a little bit more, but it did provide a little information allowing us to know the year and the service life of the equipment and whatnot. So we will be upgrading the system before the end of the year. This would be hoses, filters, things of that nature. But for next year, I would like to start looking at the possible replacement of the fuel system in its entirety. Anything we purchase this year can be transferred over into a new system, but the bigger portion of it would be like the removal of all of the tanks from the property, the below ground tanks, the fuel pumps. Most of that system was installed in 1989, and it's way past its prime. So we've had a company come in and take a look at it. They're putting together a couple of designs, thoughts, for myself to bring back to council in the next couple of weeks or in the next month or so, just to have a look at it with some costing. But that's the big project for down there. We originally had a drainage project planned for there, and we didn't get the funding for it, which kind of put it on hold for a little bit. And then we found out there was some fuel system issues we needed to work through, and it felt at the time we shouldn't be spending that money on the drainage just yet until we get the fuel system figured out, which now we do, and we'd like to move forward in the new year on both of those projects. So it would be the fuel system upgrade and then the drainage plan that I had brought to council earlier in the year regarding getting the water away from the hangars and things like that. And then on the runway and taxiway would be crack sealing. It's something that we got looking at last year, and it's a joint project that we can work with the county on for crack sealing. It's the same technique used on the roadway, so we could join in with them on their crack sealing projects. As far as the terminal building and training goes, we didn't get to the framing and insulating of the basement this year, so that would be something I would like to put into next year's plan. And then just continued staff training across the board through the municipality. Training took a bit of a turn to the wayside just due to COVID. So now we're slowly getting back into online training. And I would like to continue that into the new year with more training for our staff down there.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions, but does any member of council have any questions? I would like to ask, because you're gonna have to remind me, the fuel system, you had just mentioned it being the underground tanks and whatnot, and mentioned the date 1989, which, yes, it's a while ago, but it's not forever ago. So is that something that is a proactive preventative move, or is it required? Tanks are all inspected and whatnot. So what's the rationale for the size of that project? Because if we've talked about that detail, I don't recall.
Yeah, so every year, every 2 years, the tanks have to be pressure tested, which we're currently having them pressure tested next week, I believe. I was just emailing them this morning, and we're trying to get it scheduled for next week. So that'll be completed, and then that'll have us in compliance with any rules and regulations regarding that. As far as the replacement of the system, yes, it's not recommended to take the system, those tanks, they're fiberglass, both of them are fiberglass. One's a 10,000 liter and one's a 20,000 liter. Once you get past their service life, which is about 20 years, you start getting into that territory of how long do you keep them? This is a proactive approach to replacing the tanks before we get to that failure stage, which by no means are we close to that failure stage, but it's being proactive and putting us into a more robust system down there that can handle, more fuel. As we've seen, the amount of fuel sales that we're going through, an up-to-date system that currently works more efficient than what we currently have. And again, throwing more, we're putting money into a system that we're going to have to replace very shortly. So, again, taking that proactive, where if we do what we can now to get us through to the next 2 years for the replacement of it, it would be a benefit to us.
And in the meantime, I know there are ample airport reserves for development purposes, but is there an opportunity to set aside some reserves toward that inevitable project so that it isn't a huge impact? What's your plan? I think I just dipped into budget discussion, but what's your plan for financing that?
Right, and we've had some discussion around that, just coming up with some ideas on how we can fund the project. And my recommendation in budgets and discussion would be that we utilize the airport development plan. We've been saving that money for a long time, and I think this would be a prime candidate to put it back into the airport to allow us to replace that system and provide complete the drainage project that was scheduled there. So both of those projects, I would recommend funding those through the development plan.
Okay, and I have a couple more, but Deputy Mayor Danielson, go ahead, please.
2 questions. Is there any concern whatsoever about contamination around the fuel tanks, and if we get into replacing them?
So currently there is nothing that's pointing to any kind of contamination. We do our testing regularly for clean and clear, which allows us to say that the fuel is clean, clear, and although it's a liquid, dry. So it's safe for use. We document that regularly. We have had the pipes tested between the tanks and the pump, which allows us to know that it's not leaking. So we're well within our regulation limit for that, to know that that's not leaking. Because we currently dip our tanks multiple times through the week, and our fuel system that we currently have, Fuel Master, we compare the rates between our daily, weekly fuel dips and our fuel sales. There is no sign of any kind of loss, whether that's through theft or through leakage in the ground. The pressure test will also confirm that as well. And I've also reached out to our our environmental engineer, Cambium, and they have suggested that if we do go to replace the system, they would come up and they would take a sample of the soil. We would have to wait 24 hours, and then they would give us the approval to pull the tanks and backfill. As long as there was no contaminants in the ground, which I can only assume there wouldn't be, they would approve that in a written letter, and we could close it all in and have no further issue. With documentation down the road, that if someone ever came to us and said, hey, you had in-ground tanks, did you take them out appropriately? We would have all that documentation on hand.
And my second question is related to hangars. For the last, say, couple of years, the hangars been leased out completely, or have we still got empty hangars? And is there a waiting list? This is leading somewhere.
Yeah, so no, we don't have a waiting list anymore. We've exhausted the waiting list and have had no interest. We've also put ads out to Kijiji, other places, and have had no local paper and have had no interest in it. Hangar D is still vacant, and also one of the larger new hangars is vacant.
Okay. I'm just sort of thinking on the, kind of going back to the long-term planning, that if interest in the hangars does pick up, that we had set aside additional land, if indeed we needed to build more hangars at some point in time. I think we might have to look at a slightly different design than what we had for these, but okay, that was just kind of a long-term planning thought.
Yeah, sorry, if I could also touch on that. The design of the hangars is great. There's really, the design itself of the actual building, there's really nothing wrong with it. It was a great design. It was a great option that the operation or the airport manager at the time and the council at the time had approved. They're great hangars. The downside to it is the location in which they're placed. They're just a little bit lower than the surface around them, unfortunately, and that causes the water to come inside them. So it's not a huge. I would strongly recommend, if we did put more hangars, that we mimic what's there, just a different slope away from the building and design of the grounds would be my suggestion.
And the same with the doors. Like I kind of understood that there were some issues with the doors, which I think were fairly specialized at the time. But I'm starting to think that it's not the doors that are a problem, but again the drainage.
Everything that all the issues we've had down at the hangar that I've been aware of over the last 2 years has just strictly been the drainage itself. We have put the hangar doors on a program with the rest of our garage doors, overhead doors, with throughout the township, which is fire department and public works. Anything with the overhead door is now put on a program where they're inspected yearly. And we've had no issues over the last 2 years having all of our doors inspected and past completion. So
thanks, Adam.
And I think this is, I don't want to get into it today, but I think with two empty hangars and no waiting list, I don't see constructing of new hangars being on the agenda anytime soon. And I also, again, not for today, but just for budget time as regards the fuel system, we can flesh it out a little later on, but I'm not understanding if the fuel is clean and clear and there's no leaks, and there's no sign of loss, and the pressure tests come back okay. I don't know why we would be putting it into a fuel system, but that's for budget. So we'll carry on there. Adam, I wanted to ask, what's our timeline for pavement study? Because I know there's a requirement for a pavement study on runways, and is that coming up soon, or did we miss it, or has it just been folded into daily duties?
I'm sorry, pavement study is, what are you regarding?
So pavement studies for runways, and I'm not sure, Angie, you may recall, are they legislated, or is it something that we choose to do at our own behest? Because we had a pavement study a number of years ago, and so you had mentioned crack sealing, and so the obvious next question for me is, is what's next steps for a pavement study. I think was it 2012 we had it? Do you remember, Angie?
Yes, I do. I think it was 12 or 13. And we'd have to check the legislation. I don't know it off the top of my head, whether it's a cycle that we have to do. Crack sealing, definitely. But the pavement sealing, we'd have to check the legislation on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if we are due for any sort of legislated pavement study, we need to consider that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I just wanted to say, I've mentioned to Angie a couple of times that I know it's been a difficult year, but we do have a new staff member that we haven't, heard from, and I would love us to just look forward to, as things settle down into more routine and he can get some of that training and things taken care of. Be great to know what I read in the newspaper what his thoughts are on what could happen at the airport. It'd be nice to sometime in the new year be able to hear, through you from him about what some of his ideas are that we might be considering for continuing to promote the airport and, continue fuel sales and continue to work toward, increased viability there. So we'll look forward to something like that in the new year, sometime in the new year. And anything else on this particular page for Adam? Okay, waste, one of our biggest ones. Lots of plans.
So with the waste side of things, we'll be looking at Pine Springs. It was part of the plan this year was to do some site reconfiguration, which wasn't completed. So we'd be looking at doing that next year. That's just a matter of moving the building into a better location. Maple Lake, the Operations Center design plan, stage 1. Now that was brought to council in a report earlier, not too long ago, and was put on hold till we seen the asset management plan, and then was to be brought back here and then into the budget discussion too. So I would like to revisit that discussion and see, revisit that and see where we can go with it for planning for next year. The alternate is if we don't move into some of that design plan, that we'll have to look at a site reconfiguration within the current site of some of the infrastructure we have in place. Hawk Lake, the closure plan, signage and site work, that's all being taken care of right now. Some of the signage is being put together and installed with the closure date of October 16, 2021. As we get closer, we'll be designing the final layout of the site itself. There'll be the tender process and then work to be completed in 2022, early 2022. The McClintock Lagoon, we're still waiting for the site expansion. It's ongoing. So once we hear more back there, that will be brought back to council. The fence extension, I would like to extend the current fence that we installed last year, which would go from the lagoon down towards the actual fence or the gate, the automatic gate. So that will stop anybody from parking on the road and trying to say run a hose up over the ditch line and then into our lagoon without going through our process. Not that that's happened. We have no documentation of that happening. It's just extra security for us. Under general, just site improvements throughout. We're always trying to improve our sites, whether that be traffic flow, signage, location of, say, bins or any kind of program we have in place. The Waste Wizard mobile app. The Waste Wizard has been was introduced 2 years ago and has been very successful. We would like to potentially introduce the mobile app side of it. So that people would be able to have that just like any other app on their phone, their smartphone. Waste bylaw review, waste diversion programs, organic waste reduction and diversion program strategy, more educational activities and events, as long as maybe COVID relaxes a little bit and allows us to do more of that. Again, working with the collaboration of the county on the climate change project, which waste reduction and diversion strategies, which we'll have more information on those as we go to these meetings, which are scheduled for later in December.
Sorry, I'm just scribbling a note here. More of that. Okay, any questions from council on this, on waste disposal and diversion issues? Councillor Dayu, is that your hand? It's funny, you're sitting in front of a window and sometimes when you put your hand up, it's the same color as the window behind you, so I'm not sure. So
Okay.
go ahead, please.
There we go. How's that?
There you go, that's even better, yeah.
Good. Yes, it's a thought or a concern that I've raised before, Adam, so I hope you don't mind a tiny bit of the repetition on this. I know from your previous reports and Melissa's previous reports to us about EPR that the township will have full control over whether we want to accept the terms of EPR and develop a partnership with some of those producers or not, whether they can use some of our locations or not. I appreciate that we will have, or we should have, quite a bit of control there. Having said that, some of the site reconfiguration plans that are underway are pretty high ticket items. They're pretty expensive. And I just wonder, between the team, has there been any fear about, wow, what if we put in X amount of dollars to a site reconfiguration and then within 2 years, we do want to accept the terms of the EPR strategy, but we've just reconfigured the site in a way that isn't going to be amenable to what those terms are via EPR. Is that something that you've boiled through and you've come up with an acceptable tolerance of risk on, or do you have anything to say on that?
Of course. So with the EPR, in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to our landfill sites, the EPR and recycling materials, as far as containers, papers, things of that nature, is a small part of what actually comes into our landfill site. The operational design plan definitely takes into consideration the EPR, but it's more geared towards items like household waste and the C&D products that are being brought in, bulky waste, things of that nature. That's why it takes into consideration the scales. It takes into consideration the brush, things of that nature. The larger items that are currently being placed on our site that we have to move around consistently. That's the real driving factor to this operational design plan, because as that report that was brought to council, we're not so much losing money in the current system we have. It's just we can be better at it. We can be more efficient by pay per use, pay by weight, with a set of scales. That's the driving factor of this back in 2010. When it was first looked at, that scales would be a very efficient and beneficial item to have in our landfill sites, which most landfills do have them throughout the province. So yes, the EPR definitely has some playing factors in on it. Whether that means that instead of a 40-yard bin that paper is dropped into, maybe it's geared more towards having a compactor bin on site. Maybe a pro will come to us and say, well, we don't want your paper in a 40-yard open where it's getting wet. We want it put in a sealed 40 container and it be compacted so our truck takes out the most it can. And in that case, yes, the site is designed to be reconfigured within its current infrastructure. If you ever are up, well, obviously, Jennifer, you're up in near Oxtongue and you come by I think it's the District of Muskoka has a transfer station there. If you take a drive in there, that's very similar to the setup that we would be looking at, where they have compactors backed up against the bin. I'm sorry, they have compactors backed up against the concrete wall and people just throw in from the top, and it works quite well. So to answer your question, yes, we have taken that into consideration and feel that this site is designed to handle the next 50 years of whatever could come along.
Great, thank you. It's reassuring to hear about that level of flexibility that you've pre-built into the plan. So I appreciate the refresher on the topic.
Okay, anything else okay, Lisa Berry, go ahead, please.
Yes, there was a fair bit of talk about collaboration of services yesterday in the discussion. I'm sure you're aware. Two things. I just wondered if there is anything that should be put on hold until conversations occur. And the other thing is, was there any buy-in this year by the other municipalities for the mobile app? It's a sort of 2-point question there.
As far as collaboration and being and having items put on hold, again, there was really never. We talked a lot in all of our meetings about and I don't want to overspeak on anything, but we did talk a lot about a combined area. The hardest part for all of our municipalities is our geographical location. And we find this a lot, whether we're purchasing trucks or we're purchasing bins or we're putting together contracts for haulage and so for us, it's very difficult to, if there was a central area that all the material could be brought to, where one hauler could haul it away, there is a definite benefit to that. However, we still need our individual collection areas. I don't think you'll ever see an individual collection area not be in Algonquin Highlands. So what I see down the road is maybe a consolidation of our own sites to reduce, to see savings and reduce our sites down to maybe 2 or 3 key sites. And then from there, it could be trucked to a location in the county where, say, Minden, Dysart, we all truck it to one area, and then it gets hauled out. I could see the benefit in that, and that being a potential down the road. But until those further discussions we'll always need to collect, and we'll always need a spot to put to landfill that household waste. And given that the longevity of Maple Lake, that's the prime site for a more central area. Even if we had to truck it from Oxtongue to Maple or truck it from Dorset to Maple, Maple will always be that central, I shouldn't say always, it's most likely that it'll always be that central area for us. As far as the app goes, yes, I do believe Melissa has reached out to I believe 3 other municipalities on the app, and have had the discussion where this does look like it would be an efficient item to have put in place. A lot of people, when they come to the landfill, they do like, and they have been on the Waste Wizard. However, having it directly on their phone while they're pulling in or waiting in lineup has been talked about as a benefit to the site user.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment the question that you asked, Lisa, because and maybe this is from the long-standing and a little bit jaded perspective, is some comments were made yesterday about alignment, realignment, consistency, sharing same language, and opportunity. The opportunity to do any of those things has existed for years, and the reason why they haven't happened is people. And so the direction is going to have to be made by councils to say thou shalt. And that's how it's going to have to be. The other thing that I find very interesting is, we all do endless conversations about waste and how to handle it and what to do. And yet there are so many models existing in other countries, especially European countries, for certain methodologies for disposal and processing and renewal. And I sometimes feel so much that North America is still in the Stone Age around some of this stuff. And I look forward to the province and even the feds at that level embracing and helping us invest in some of these less Stone Age ways of disposal and processing. It's sometimes quite frightening that we're so far behind wall in that, but that's a lament for a different day, perhaps. Councillor Barry.
Some of that's, we have to dispose of things that are being produced for like that. It's a catch-22. If we didn't have those things being produced, we wouldn't have to recycle them as far as packaging and that goes. But another thing, just an observation, Adam, I just wanted to say that the public education that's been going out on the internet and on the radio with all of the recycling tips and tricks has been really successful. I just wanted to share that observation.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to Melissa as well.
Anything else on disposal, waste sites, diversion? It's a big budget item and a big social issue discussion, or just social discussion issue. If not, then we'll move on to staff and training. What's ahead for you folks this year, Adam?
So as almost every department has come along with some staffing requirements, we're pretty much in line with that as well. You know, the long-standing what we've put in place, and we've put it in place for quite a few years, is a slow process where we hired one seasonal, and then it worked out great, and then we kept them on, and it's just slowly been helping us every year. So currently, we hire a seasonal operator that gets shared between the Dorset and Stanhope Public Works Yard, strictly for road work. This year, we hired on 2 seasonals just because we had one staff member off for a couple months, and we'll be back in January. What I'm proposing is that I would like to hire these seasonal staff members on through the summer as we currently do, which would be an additional 1 person through the summer, and then have them stay on through the winter as well. Some of the factors that we come into play here is that we've looked back through, and Jeannie's been a wonderful help on this, has helped me look back through the years past. And we have staff members that are, you know, consecutively working 14, 15, 16 days in a row, given the winter weather that we've come up, or that's been brought to us. You know, in 2000 and I have some of the stuff here, but like in 2018, we worked 27 days out of out of 31 in December. I mean, I've worked for the municipality for 10 years, and as an operator and a supervisor, that was not uncommon. And it's no one's fault. It's just it's the way the weather comes in. Weather comes, we go to work. It's what we do. So I would like to propose having some extra staff through the winter time. This would help alleviate some of the weekend work. We would be able to design a weekend schedule, which would automatically allow a staff member to be off, you know, guaranteed. They're not going to come in because we have it covered. This would also be a great opportunity to take into consideration our succession planning as our staff are getting up there in age. They're still performing their duties. They're doing a great job, and they're getting closer to retirement. You know, we can start looking at that and transitioning staff, you know, using their knowledge and experience, and we can transition new staff into their positions potentially. It helps with, again, with staff that have been on with the township for many years. Their vacation levels are starting to get higher too. So they're taking more of the vacation when it's nicer weather. So that's through the summer months that's when our bigger projects are. So yeah, so that's the consideration we've taken in when we're looking at staffing regarding the roads work. When it comes to the maintenance staff, we have generally hired a student, which usually starts end of June, give or take, and runs till end of August, generally the summer season for a student. And although this is a great opportunity for students, I'd like to propose hiring a seasonal maintenance worker that would start early mid-May and go till end of October. This helps us get ready for the season as well. This is where we find, you know, getting everything, all of our equipment, getting our buildings, our grounds, getting everything up and ready for that big season of grass cutting, garbage pickup, things of that nature, and then help us transition from the heavy season into the winter season, which is still heavy, just a different type of work. So that's where the staffing for my department would come in. And training and education, you know, we tried our best this year to get as much training in as we could, given the circumstances of COVID. Fortunately, a lot of the online training, we were able to do some of it. But there has been some in-class training that our staff members have been able to perform, all following COVID protocols through like ground force training and a couple other places that we've generally dealt with in the past. We just completed CPR training. We've completed plow truck training for the tandems, and as well as our pickup truck training. And we also have sidewalk training coming up that's actually through a webinar that the maintenance staff can sit in on. So, you know, the opportunity was slow at the beginning, but now it's starting to pick up. So some of that's been completed, and we'll be looking at that again for next year.
I see some hands. I see Liz first and Lisa second.
I've got a couple of questions, but specific to the staffing. I see the way this flows in it, and it makes sense to me. But I'm just wondering, Adam, if you can do the math for us. Like, you know, given what you've got, or, you know, for periods of time and in temporary staff and what you're proposing to do, what does this, the bottom line is, how many FTEs does this add?
Of course, and what I can do is my plan was to bring that to the budget discussions, that we wouldn't be hiring. Currently, right now, budget was approved to allow one seasonal staff member to stay on until May through till 2021, and that was for a leave of one of our current staff members. And then with the COVID, we've allowed one extra staff member to stay on until the end of December, and then they would they've actually transitioned. They will be moving into the new maintenance position that we just finished hiring for. So moving into budget for 2021, yes, I'll be able to bring that back to council for further discussion for approval with those numbers.
Okay. My other question was not about staffing so much, but it just occurred to me that we really didn't touch on that I saw anything to do with these a new garage in Stanhope, and whether I know it's huge. However, you know, if we're thinking in terms of stages and shifting things around in the yard, is there anything that we can do in preparation? Like, can we do things in stages?
Of course. So in regards to the last conversation and the last design plan we had with the garage for Stanhope, you know, the location was decided it was going to be down in the lower pit. We had taken a look at a couple designs of the buildings, which council agreed to one design, but I would like to, if further conversation was going to be had, I would like to bring that back now. With COVID, it's really opened our eyes to the size of the building, and not so much the overall size, but more of the lunchroom size, the office room size, and things of that nature. So the current building that we were going to be designing was a 2 office, 1 lunchroom, which we may have to revisit that to be more of a 2 office, 2 lunchroom potentially. But that's for further discussion down the road. As far as what we can do now, as long as right now we have staff spread over quite a bit of area. You know, maintenance is working out of the Stanhope Community Center. Public Works, the roads staff are working out of the roads garage. And then we're trying to keep everybody somewhat segregated so that they, you know, if something happens, we don't contaminate the entire crew. Status quo for now, it's working pretty good. Down the road, there's really, we've had lots of conversations about trying to modify the Public Works garage on whether or not we could do any kind of addition onto it or change it in any way to make it fit our need. And through that conversation, it is very difficult. Once we start touching the building and pulling permits on the building, it's a lot of work. So right now we've kind of just been in limbo on not really knowing where to go yet, but you know, there's information there.
I guess my thinking was specific to, if I'm not mistaken, we were talking about placing the new garage where the sand pile is, and relocating a smaller building that's there. I just kind of wondered about somehow working that into the plan. But if you're looking at like not even utilizing that area, I guess we need to put that on hold. Sorry, Angie, go ahead.
Madam CAO.
Going back to the discussions that council had around the new garage, it was staff's understanding that after looking at the costs around it, it wasn't considered feasible at this time. So the project was put on pause for now. So if that is council interested in bringing that back to discuss?
It certainly is. It's my recollection that we got hung up on the solar option and sort of couldn't get ourselves past that as a group as part of that discussion. So would look to council for the thoughts on that. And I see Liz first, and then Jim.
You know, my concern is despite the fact that it's a costly item, our tour of that facility, if you want to call it a tour, was really eye-opening, and I'm really concerned about the safety in the building and the you know, the environment within which the guys are trying to work. And I know that we've done some things to try and alleviate that, but you know, I don't think we can just say, well, we can't afford it, so we're not doing it, because I mean, it's even identified in our org review as a real safety issue. Health and safety.
I don't disagree, and I even just in some of the suggestions that were made today, I see that a public works garage, based on our tour and what we know and our previous commitment there. There's a number of things that were suggested today, event stages and swing sets, and there's a whole bunch of things. They're not huge dollar values, but they're, you know, we have to decide where the money goes and for what reason. And I think there's a number of things that have been proposed that could be, the funds for which could be diverted into something like the garage. And you're very good to point out, to remind us our reaction to that environment when we did do that, how to walk around there. So let's keep that in mind. Councillor Gaillou.
My recollection concurs with that of Angie's. I believe that when brought to us, given all of the things that we had in front of us, we did say we're going to have to park this. I don't believe we were caught on the solar panels at that stage. I think we said got to cull it. Having said that, I agree with you, Deputy Mayor Danielson and Mayor Moffat, you know, that this is and should be a priority, and perhaps we should be throwing it back into an immediate position in the parking lot just to see at what point can we get it back. I do fear it just dropping off. So if we could even bring it back into our upcoming budget discussion, so that we know it's there and we know it's a priority, I would concur with that.
Yeah, and thanks Liz for bringing that back up, and I don't think the rest of us recognize that it wasn't there. It wasn't there with good reason, but I agree. I think it's yeah, we need to look at it, and that's our job, is to look at everything that's been put before us and pick which is the most important for the community and moving things forward. Angie, did you have your hand up? Somebody did. Lisa Berry does.
Even if it's not a project that could be put into next year's budget, we should still be allocating money towards it, because it's not a need that's going to be going away.
Well, and that's a good point, you know, and I mentioned earlier about the fuel system, and we'll find out more about that. Historically, we've done a tremendous job of realizing that we sometimes can't manage a project, and we'll sock money away in reserves over a number of years to soften the blow a number of years later. And there are going to be more and more pressures for fewer dollars or more dollars, depending on what we decide. And that may form a greater part of our budgeting process, is to be divvying up little bits and pieces over a longer term to ensure that something gets done each time. So we need to keep that in mind as well. Is there any other hands in the air for anything to do with Adam's department? Okay, well, Adam, well, thank you for your time, and lots to consider.
One quick comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I absolutely loved the graphic that you used at the beginning of your presentation with the lines and the years, and it's just such a good image for us going forward and planning ahead. I thought it was great.
Thank you.
All the presentations were great, but that in particular struck me.
Okay, Adam, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
So just sort of to, I don't know if anybody has, before I do my closing remarks, any final thoughts from council on anything they think we missed or should reconsider or continue to discuss at the moment? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I know that this is a difficult one and it comes with a number of challenges. But when we talked about parks and park development, we haven't really talked about the log chute and the attached park. Even if we can't do anything with the log chute itself, which almost makes me want to cry, there is a nice little park there. And we had talked in the past about looking at making some changes there to make it a little bit more accessible. And I just don't want it to fall off the radar. You know, I know that the log chute won't fall off the radar, but you know, with the park as well, I just wonder if I just want to make sure that there's continued consideration for it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're absolutely right, and I've had a number of conversations from folks who are quite anxious to see something done with the chute. The challenge with the structure itself is that until or unless Trent-Severn Waterway repairs the face of the dam, there's not much point in fixing the log chute itself and attaching it to a dam that it might have to get detached from should TSW do work on the face of the dam. So it's a bit chicken and egg there. But yeah, as regards the park, and I wonder, just an idea, I know that every year we apply for accessibility money, and there are some accessibility issues, and not in terms of meeting accessibility requirements per se, but just it's an interesting site topographically, and is there any opportunity or appetite for looking into an accessibility grant to assist with some of those things? So I know that there are, because there's a lot of money around right now, and I do know, I was doing some research on another project, not related to the township, but I had an idea for, and there's some money out there. So we could maybe talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, I just had this remaining vision in my mind when it comes to that park of a certain special lady with a cane trying to walk down that slope to get into the park, and well, there's even a bit of a slope to get to the bridge that's on the dam itself. But it really brought home to me the need that we need to do something there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the slope from the road to the dam is actually on federal land because so there'd be a partnership there, but they're amenable. I mean, we've worked well with those folks before. And as I mentioned, sort of, I was talking over you and I apologize, but we do need to have regard as well for staffing workloads. And you know, this council has always been, has always had pretty high standards, and we're, you know, let's progress and do more, have more, and be more. And we can see that in the way our staff responds beautifully and achieves a tremendous amount, but we're also seeing it in the need for more staff. So at some point we can't do everything for everybody all the time. And so let's leave that idea with the CAO. That would be one more thing for Chris to look at, but yeah, we can maybe have a look at something on the log chute park as well, if it fits. Let's just not
I didn't necessarily mean that it needed to happen this year. I just want it to stay on the radar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. Is there any other final thoughts from anybody else on today? So I would like to close by thanking staff, Angie and all of her staff. We've seen definitely, as I just mentioned, some staffing implications that will be coming forward to us. So lots of project decisions, you know, also wrestling the asset management plan. As I want to echo sort of Jeannie's thoughts in the beginning, that I think we all are impressed with the scope and extent of projects that Algonquin Highlands is able to undertake every year. And we couldn't do any of that without the staff. And I'm incredibly proud of our staff and everything they do. They approach projects with care and you know, thoughtful approach. And I just look forward to another great year in Algonquin Highlands and continuing our progress for the betterment of the community. So And thanks to the council for being the council of reasonable people. And I guess that's it. So we need a mover and a seconder to just one for all those reports?
Yes.
Yeah, so if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the departmental projects and priorities, Councillor Dayu and Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Barry, be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of departmental 2021 projects and priority presentations. The council directs that the 2021 projects and priorities be referred to staff for inclusion in the draft 2021 municipal budget for consideration by council.
All in favor? That's carried, thank you. And may I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Councillor Barry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved that bylaw 2020-103 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its November 26th, 2020 special meeting be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with a corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. I have to apologize. Was that confirmatory?
Confirmatory.
That was
Yes.
confirmatory. Okay, adjournment. A mover and a seconder to adjourn today's discussion. Councillor Barry, Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Dayu, be it resolved that the November 26th, 2020 special council meeting is hereby adjourned at 12:15 p.m.
All in favor? That's carried. Great, thank you, everybody. Lots to look forward to and lots of decisions ahead. So everybody have a great weekend and we'll see you on the screen next time.